sun don't ever shine than to see you with another when you promise to be mine. Well, I'd rather be a sailor and sail out on the sea than to stay at home a married man with a baby on my knee. If I were some little birdie, well, I'd never make my nest on the ground. I'd make my nest in my pretty one's breast, and I never ever would come down. No, I never ever would come down.
Well, coming off a made-up long weekend, our very own long weekend, I almost hesitate to step on the toes of Ayla Brooke and the sound men there. Just some fabulous, would you call it plucking? Would you call it plucking? Is that
plucking? It's like finger plucking.
Yeah. It was a banjo, right? Wasn't it? Or like something like a banjo?
There was a banjo in
It's
there.
not your standard six-string acoustic guitar that we were hearing there, I don't think.
No.
Beautiful work. From the album Desolation Sounds Off Fallen Tree Records, we remain grateful for Ayla Brooke's donation of that tune, of that album, essentially, for our use here on Real Talk. A good Tuesday morning to you. It's June 15th. Ryan Jesperson back in the chair. It's great to be here. Sarah Hoyle sitting across the plexiglass from me. We won't be able to say that for much longer. I'm sort of starting to feel like things are starting, although I've had this feeling before.
Yeah. Whoa.
I've been optimistic before. But now everybody's offering, all different kinds of reasons and incentives to get vaccinated, including one we're going to talk about in just a second. Of course, this show, is presented by the team at Bitcoin Well, our presenting sponsor. I was talking to a buddy over the weekend, who's just huge on crypto, and he's like, I've got so many angles on what you need to cover on your show. He's like, I hear some of the pushback and the protest from some people that aren't big on crypto. They're not big on Bitcoin. He goes, some of the conversations you're having, he goes, we need to dig even deeper, man. He blew my mind on the magnitude of what this crypto story is all about. When I have questions like that, I take them to the team at Bitcoin Well, and I advise you to do the same. Try to make sense of everything right now. Everybody's got their strong opinions on crypto, right? It's either a joke or it's the entire new way. And if it's not a joke, you're going to want to know more about it. And if you think it is and you want to hear a counter argument, let me tell you something. They love the tough questions there. You'll find them under the sponsors tab at ryanjesperson.com.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
So, we spent the long weekend hanging out, did a little bit of wheeling. And I'm going to be showing you a couple of photos later on today. As a matter of fact, I'm inserting our family photos into Positive Reflections just because I can. But there are also some amazing videos and other submissions from those of you that have been out and enjoying the great outdoors. We have a video coming up from Brad. His sister is just hammering away on her road bike, and he tells us exactly why she's so motivated. It's a wonderful story. James has a couple of photos of his kids doing something that I think everybody does. Maybe not everybody. Some folks have like smell sensitivities or things like that. But if you walk past a lilac bush, it's a pretty standard move, I think, to stop and just bury your face into the lilacs, isn't it? Sarah Hoyles, you look up absolutely appalled by this suggestion. Really? You can't stand the smell of lilacs?
Stank.
Wow! Samuel G. Brooks? Yourself?
I am surprised. I have lilacs. I have a lilac tree in my yard. I love the smell of it, and I just find it unruly. So I'm constantly pruning this thing.
Oh.
But they are, the lilacs are great.
The only thing about the lilacs is that they only last for so long.
And then they get brown and
then
shrivelly.
they get all
Yeah.
gnarly actually.
Yeah.
But when lilacs are booming,
They're beautiful. I just don't want to smell them. They smell.
Really?
They smell. They smell like
say it.
cat piss.
What are you talking
It's
about?
it's like
If that's what cat piss smells like, I'm adopting a cat,
in.
and I am not litter box training it. It can just move all over the. Oh my gosh, we're 4 minutes into the show, just absolutely off the rails right now. Really,
like cilantro. How some people are like it tastes like soap.
Yeah.
Well-
Apparently, there's like a genetic thing at play there.
Well, maybe that's what this is.
with cilantro.
So I'm just
It might just be that your genes are a little
superior.
bit broken, I was
No,
going to say.
I
Like a
would
little
say
bit twisted,
superior.
like you're
I would say
experiencing some sort of a
superior.
breakdown, obviously. So James, so that's in Positive Reflections, which is coming up. We have a lot to catch up on. I'm going to be totally 100% honest with you. I did so there were a few things, and I would like to open this show with a confession. And then we're going to talk to Richard McColl, who's a foreign correspondent. He's the host of the very popular Colombia Calling podcast. As a matter of fact, as soon as we tweeted that he was on this morning, and then we're grateful he retweeted that he was on, all of a sudden we're already hearing from people that are like, this is my favorite podcast. This is an amazing podcast. And at first I was like, yeah. And then I realized they were talking about Colombia Calling, not Real Talk. But that's okay. We're bringing these two podcasts together. We're going to learn more about what's going on in this this country that's seeing serious protests, obviously some pretty extreme police response to some of these protests, which have been described as peaceful protests. We're going to dig into it with Richard, who's there on the ground. We're going to be talking a little bit later on today with Pamela Roach, who's an assistant prof in family medicine, director of Indigenous Health Education at the Cumming School of Medicine, University of Calgary. Pamela's got a great perspective. We're continuing our conversation on Indigenous health education, Indigenous healthcare, and Alberta's curriculum. There's kind of a scenario here where a few of the topics that we touch on with our ongoing conversations, our ongoing coverage, are swirling together here in sort of one in one arena. So we'll look forward to that conversation with Pamela Roach. That's coming up, and then Kathy Dabrus, Dr. Kathy Dabrus, a family physician out of Victoria. We realized it's been maybe a little while, at least relatively speaking, since we've spoken about vaccines. Not in particular some of the general stuff. Some of it where you go, yeah, I'm pretty into it. In the sense that I watch the news, I pay attention to what's going on, I try to stay on top of things. I subscribe to Real Talk. I download Real Talk and listen every single day. I kind of feel like I know what's going on. Vaccines are safe. I feel confident about it. But there are new things coming up, right? It seems every time I talk to somebody about vaccines, you find out someone says, well, have you got your second shot? Well, I just found out you don't have to have the same manufacturer, right? For your second dose as your first. And I'm going, what? Wait, what? So we thought it might be time to get caught up on the news, a bit of a vaccine Q&A. That'll be coming up with Dr. Dabrus in approximately, we'll call it an hour and a half from now-ish. So if you're, on the live chat, it'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions of the good doctor. Of course, you can also take a look at our hashtag, which is the Real Talk RJ hashtag. Use it on Instagram and Twitter. And, we'll take questions through the morning. You can send it to us whenever, and I'll look forward to that. I'm hoping that we get a couple of curveballs, a couple of questions from folks with vaccines that maybe they go, hey, here's something I've been thinking about, but I haven't heard any of this on the news. I have no idea. Dr. Dabrus has been doing a ton of work, part of a campaign called Victoria Family Doctors Counter Vaccine Hesitancy. So she's seen it all, she's heard it all, and we look forward to that conversation. We'll get to some of your emails today, and we've got a lot of catching up to do. I promised, I said I was going to open with a confession, then I didn't confess. I could tell by the look on your face you were waiting for it, weren't you? You're like,
breath.
buddy, yeah, see what you do is like you tease, and then you get everybody on the hook, and then you go through and you say, here's all the things we're going to do, and then you bring them back, right? So
I see what you're doing.
Here's my confession. I was a little bit negligent on a few things that fall in my lap, that are my duties over the course of the weekend. And then I'm getting judgmental looks from my team members because they know it to be true. On Friday, it was my responsibility to be down in Calgary at a very specific time because I was receiving the keys. To my 1992 Jeep XJ. We have just had a new transmission put in. This after all the rear suspension, brakes were done, and a not brand new, rebuilt motor. We're talking the 4-liter inline 6, all the bells and whistles. This thing is, I mean, if you want to see what it looks like, you should be following me on Instagram. You see it right now. You can go take a look at it and see. But I had to be down to get the keys. Super excited. So this weekend, I'm breaking in this new motor. Like we're wheeling the truck that has risen from the ashes. It's been parked in a farmer's field for almost 2 years now, following a catastrophic engine incident. So I had to be down at that time. What did this mean? Well, I'm not on my laptop and I'm not on my tablets or my devices while I'm driving. That's a non-starter.
Well, obviously you don't.
We're just trying to pump our tires here and remind everybody to not text and drive and all that kind of stuff. I got down to Calgary and immediately had to hit the road. And the whole time I'm thinking, I have these clips pulled from our broadcast and I'm supposed to be promoting the show and I'm supposed to be pushing this stuff out. But I just quite frankly didn't have time because my priorities were not the thousands and thousands of people that watch our highlights. Rather, the 5-year-old boy sitting in the seat behind me, Wyatt Rudy Jesperson, my beloved son, the light of my life. And we were going to get out so we could get in an evening wheel on the Friday night, kicking off our homemade long weekend out in the foothills, the beautiful foothills, Kananaskis country, what has somewhat become a bit of a controversial area, McLean Creek Provincial Recreation Area. This is the one spot, you remember, that's exempted from the new Kananaskis user fees. So we've been going out there for 25 or 30 years. And so this is where we were at. And then no reception. What am I supposed to do? Wyatt says to me, Dad, is there Wi-Fi out here? I said, there's no Wi-Fi, kiddo. We're off the iPad. We're off the phone. So I'm sitting here, and all of a sudden I'm realizing the Real Talk Sunday message. Literally thousands of people subscribe to it and email every single week letting them know what's coming up on the show. Well, what I didn't have time to do it on Friday. I can't do it over the weekend. I'm going, oh my gosh, they're missing the Sunday message. So now we've got our clips not out. We've got our Sunday message not out. And then at some point I just had to release myself of it all. And I had to just say, someone wrote us an email and said, hey, just in case you guys are catching, this is what Real Talkers are just absolutely incredible. Somebody sent us an email and said, hey, just in case you guys are taking some flack for your homemade long weekend, we wanted to let you know, did you see this email? We wanted to let you know you have our support. We're glad you're recharging your batteries. We think that's great. Now, of course, I didn't see that till later because I was, not in range. But I reached a point where
the guilt and the shame was just
kind of
marinating.
It was I would say of with the weather that we had this weekend, it was the only cloud in the sky was the guilt and shame cloud, and I could feel it. I know you were sending it up. I could feel it.
No, I was not.
Anyway,
you don't know me, Jespo.
So I don't apologize for spending time with my family in the great outdoors, but I do kind of apologize for not pushing out clips, for not writing the Sunday message. What I did find time to do was to shoot a little exclusive to our Patreon supporters this morning. So you know what's up in your inbox right now. There's a beer set to drop this week, and our Patreon supporters have advance access to it. So we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. I mentioned the hashtag RealTalkRJ. It is powered by the team at Park Power. You can find them online at parkpower.ca. Internet, electricity, natural gas is their game. Big community players, too, which we absolutely love. I've told you before, it's one of the reasons why we reached out to them and said, we got a partner here. Kindred spirits, shared values, all that kind of stuff. 10% of their profits go right back into the nonprofits in the communities where they live and work. The promo code 2021-REAL-TALK means $70 off your first bill. No strings attached at parkpower.ca. Also, big shout out this morning to the team at Friesen Brothers. I want to remind you that Father's Day is coming up in less than a week. And Friesen Brothers has you covered with their stores in Stony Plain, Fort Saskatchewan, and Edmonton. They've got these Father's Day barbecue boxes. Highly recommend them. Trust me, it takes care of basically your entire Father's Day plan from breakfast all the way through. You've got to order it in advance, so you can check them out online under the sponsors tab at ryanjesperson.com. Plus BC Cherries now in store at Friesen Brothers. Oh, the entire team here is just, look at this, a visceral reaction to the news that BC Cherries have touched down
all year for them.
Oh yeah, man. And Friesen Brothers, proudly Alberta grown, Alberta owned, but one of the smartest things you can do in Alberta is get your hands on some BC Cherries. Let's be honest. Friesen Brothers for more than 65 years. All right, let's take a look at what's going on down in Colombia. If you've been paying attention to the news, I don't have to tell you, mass protests across the country. It seems based originally on some changes to the tax structure coming out of COVID-19, but of course there's more to it than that. Richard McColl is a long-time Anglo-Canadian based in Colombia, where he spends his time reporting from Bogota, overseeing his small hotels as well. I want to learn a little bit more about that business. He's the host of a very popular weekly podcast entitled Colombia Calling launched as an independent podcast. What was it, Richard? Something like 8 years ago. You've been doing this for in the podcast world. You are an OG, my man. You've been around for a long time.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for having me on the show, and thank you for these kind words. But yes, I mean, the Colombia Calling podcast, it's a tiny niche show, nothing like yours at all.
Oh, come on.
It's flattering to hear such words, but, I go out to the market that wants to hear about Colombia. So it's, we go out to our people. There's no mass coverage, but it goes out to the people who want to hear about it. And it's been fun, it's been fun. It's kept me sane during this COVID period as well. So, the weekly updates are always fun.
Richard, you obviously this is where you live and work. Before we get into some of the specifics about what you're seeing right now, the root of these protests, where you see this going, how change is being impacted, what is it about Colombia that drew you there? I mean, people that I've spoken with, friends of mine that are originally from Colombia, when they have an opportunity to talk about this country, their faces just light up. It's a beautiful spot.
Well, I have to say I've been in Latin America for around 18 years and Colombia now for 14 or 15 years. But Colombia has always been, it's a phenomenal country, despite, obviously the justified and unjustified reputations that it has. Obviously, not the great news hits the headlines about Colombia, but the people here are very special and incredibly resilient to what is going on. And I think for me, that was very attractive. And of course, as a journalist, a freelance journalist, I have to say, it was always there was always something to do here. There was always something to, as you say, it was sort of like a blank slate, and that's what I ended up buying colonial houses in this small town and restoring them to create tiny hotels, create an economic stimulus. Colombia has been kind of divorced from an international community for so long that there was just, this is a country that offered opportunities and has such an educated young generation that want to help and want to move forwards. And that kind of leads into what we're going to talk about a little bit.
Yeah, no, and that's why I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about Colombia, because I know that there, and when you talk about, a deserved or undeserved reputation, justified or unjustified, I mean, I think for movies, and they think of all, that's how the country's been portrayed in many ways, the drug and gang violence side of it. There's also just this wonderful country with these amazing people and absolutely stunning, by the way, landscapes. With regards to, the social fabric and the strength of programs and the context of poverty and healthcare and these types of things, this has been your project, your storytelling project through the course of COVID-19. Have you seen some of the social issues, so to speak, or maybe the social justice issues become larger issues and more subject of conversation as a result of the pandemic? Do you think that was one of the contributing factors to what we're seeing now?
Well, yeah, there's a few issues that have risen, Ryan. The pandemic, of course, has exacerbated an existing situation in the country, that of inequality, corruption that is so rampant, impunity surrounding corruption as well. You've got your elites and the political class who tend to get away with everything. But it also dates back. We're not just protesting. The people here are not just protesting this government and its sort of response to the COVID pandemic. They're protesting 40 years of governments. That's a big difference. It's been pent up. It's as if we've had everything in a dam until this moment. But you see, we had protests back in November 2019, which were held on pause with COVID. And the government had said they were going to have a grand national conversation. That was their actual title for it, to address the concerns of the youth, because it's largely the youth. I'm not going to say students. It's largely the youth that feel that have no future here in the country. No, they've got no work security, no security for their future, education or anything. So these protests in 2019 were huge. And then we had this grand national conversation which came to nothing. So you have a government that's strong on rhetoric and then, no action. But what you're also looking at is, as you know, and as you're talking about the violence, and of course we had a long-running civil war, which of course is not over. But in 2016, a peace accord was signed with the largest guerrilla group, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC as they're known. And that took out like a universal figure of hate and fear, and it was always like the bigger picture. Anything in Colombia is like, well, yes, we have to focus on the FARC, we have to focus on this conflict. With that no longer in the picture, people are now acknowledging that there are ordinary things that you and I take for granted, being from Canada or the UK, ordinary things like healthcare, education, communication that people want. And that's what we're seeing now, where you've got a young generation with nothing to lose and no fear.
Is there a sense that, well, I mean, this is a purely opinion-based, I'm asking for your opinion. Do you get the sense that these protests could push this government to act in meaningful fashion? Are the demands realistic? Is the government open to it? What's your assessment?
It's a tough one because you have a strike committee with only one youth member on it. So it's kind of like a bunch of old guys not representing exactly who is out in the streets, representing maybe the teachers union and maybe the transport union and so on. But the government themselves only have 1 more year, or slightly less than 1 more year on their mandate, and the president is constitutionally prohibited. He can't run again. So anything that happens now is all with one eye on the elections in May 2022. And so we're looking at, as things shuffle around, and no one presidential candidate will want to be seen as soft at this moment. And the state, the government themselves in power, have treated this legitimate social protest as an issue of law and order. So that will be one of the main campaigning points that we'll see in the coming months, is that the party that wants to be seen as strong on law and order. So I don't know how much will actually happen. The government has it hasn't ceded on certain things, but it's just sort of decided without conferring with the strike committee or the students, all right, we'll do this. And it's like, well, surely you should be speaking to the people. Surely you should be going out and find out what is going on and why they're so angry. And as yet, this hasn't happened.
How would you compare? I mean, Richard, as best you can with neighboring nations or in this region, Latin America. How would you compare, Colombia's economy, Colombia's prospects, employment or unemployment, housing and homelessness? Where does Colombia stack up as compared to its international neighbors?
Well, right now we have an unemployment level here of 15.1%. So that's pretty high, several million people in a population of 50 million. But we can't make comparisons particularly with Venezuela, because what has happened in Venezuela is it's gone into economic free fall, and we don't genuinely know what's going on because the press is limited in what it can report. And of course we know that there's pretty much no reaction to the COVID pandemic there, no vaccines or so on. So we don't really know what's happening. All we can tell you is that Colombians and Venezuelans cross the border, Colombians who live in Venezuela, to work in Colombia every day, or to do whatever they can to then return to Venezuela with a few pesos in their pocket. In terms of economy, the economy here is obviously, it's in decline. But Colombia has had a strong economy for a long time. We've never really had a recession. That's due to extractive materials. It's due to money laundering as well, being put back from the industry of illicit goods coming out of Colombia. It's quite a conservative country when it comes to the economics. So we'll see how it develops. We are losing certain trade ratings because of the response to COVID and because of what's going on. Of course, the social protest never helps. Peru, neighboring Peru, is obviously in all sorts of difficulties now due to the elections down there, and Keiko Fujimori, the runner-up, trying to, she's crying foul of the elections. And of course you've got Castillo who's supposedly left-wing, but seems to have some bizarre right-wing tendencies as well. And Ecuador, well, I don't really know. I couldn't really know telling you what's going on. And Brazil, well, that's another story altogether. So Colombia, I can't really say it's the most positive time for South America right now.
Yeah, it's wild, Richard. I mean, I remember back just as a young man, we called ourselves Los Toros, and we traveled for about 6 months in South America following our university graduation. We were down in Peru. Well, we flew into Ecuador like mid-September of 2000, so that meant we were into Peru in October, November. This is right when Alberto Fujimori was. I mean, the IMF and all the protests there in Lima. I remember it was wild. It's a hell of a thing to be around all of that and to understand the ramifications of this. I mean, this is a general population coming out, distraught and furious about, in some cases, actions of its own government or economic instability or what have you. How do you process this as someone who's now down there, calling it home? You've been down there for the better part, you said, of 15 years. You're a hotelier. You're an entrepreneur. I mean, personally speaking, what do you think your future looks like, and how do you wrap your mind around what you're seeing on what I'm sure is a daily basis?
It's a hard one, isn't it? I have 2 children here, but we're very stable. But I find myself conflicted. Of course, I've got passports for other countries and we could up and leave it, but I owe something to Colombia too. That I've worked very diligently and honestly here and got a large family network and employ a fair amount of people who it's just, I mean, I love it here. I love this country. I love the people. I love what I've been able to do. So I'm obviously sticking it out for a while. But it is hard. It is hard. And of course, on the tail end, I say tail end, we're still in the third peak of COVID here. But it is hard after having had the hotels largely empty for over a year. And I'm not Hilton. I've only got 17 rooms between the 2 small hotels. But it's hard. And we've done our best to survive, and we are surviving. But as you say, on a daily basis, we see protests. The most violent, let's say aggressive protests are fizzling down in a lot of the cities, but there are still hot points, hot spots for these things. And you worry a little bit, don't you? It's like how the authorities react. And that has been one of the main issues over this. When the protests started on the 28th of April, is that there's always an element of aggression, not only from the authorities, but from protesters too. There's sort of like a militant cadre of protesters, potentially infiltrated by trafficking gangs and potentially infiltrated by the other guerrilla group, the National Liberation Army, ELN. Or potentially, at the beginning it wasn't, and there was no proof that this was being done. But as the protests continue, of course you're going to have people taking advantage of a situation. So you sort of wonder, where do we go from here? And of course it's been a case of great reflection on my part. This is,
I'll acknowledge this letter, this statement rather, from Global Affairs Canada, Minister Marc Garneau, Minister of Foreign Affairs. This is back on May 9th. Canada concerned about persistent violence in Colombia. Canada deeply saddened by the loss of life and injuries in Colombia over the past week. Again, this is May 9th. Canada condemns the violence, including disproportionate use of force by security forces, urges that the violence cease. We're concerned about acts of vandalism, attacks directed against public officials. Canada calls upon all those responsible for road blockades to allow the free passage of goods and services essential to fight the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. An adequate response to you, how did you assess that at the time? And what role would you see? I mean, the majority of our audience obviously is tuning in from Canada. What would you, this is a story, Richard, to be quite honest, that I think the majority of Canadians, if you said what's going on in Colombia right now, or what's your opinion of what's going on in Colombia, I think a lot of people might say, what do you mean? To be quite honest, what's your assessment of maybe what an appropriate Canadian response might look like? And why do you think that this story isn't leading the headlines like it might?
Well, I mean, there's so much going on at the moment, isn't there? I mean, if you look back a few weeks, I do have a piece in the Globe and Mail, so it is there, but it's not covered to cover. Is it really Canada's backyard? I don't think so. It's not really something that's of great importance to Canada. I mean, each country has their sort of network, doesn't they? But yeah, I mean, it should be more reported. Obviously, I'm here. Obviously, I'm biased about that. Colombia is an important trading partner for a lot of countries. And the police brutality is something that only with international intervention and international pressure will change things here. That's one of the realities. And the government here only allowed the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to come because of the pressure from the international press in Europe, North America, and so on. And that's the truth. There's my piece. There we go. And it's one of those things. It's like any weapon, even if they're called, non-fatal weapons, can be fatal. I mean, that's the truth. And depending on who you read and who you believe, the government is saying 20 deaths. Human Rights Watch released a communique last week, called it egregious use of force against protesters. They've confirmed 40 deaths. And if you read local NGOs here, it's around 70 deaths. And of course, 2 policemen as well. You have a really big problem. You have a really big problem, and it stems from the conflict, and it stems from the fact that the police force here is under the mandate of the Ministry of Defense, because the police force was used as another type of army in the civil conflict which has been running since 1964 in Colombia. So they are not prepared for social unrest. They are not prepared to be like a force of vigilance in the city. They go at these protests as if they were, defending national sovereignty. And that's one of the big problems. And a lot of protesters are out there. And this is what happened, consolidating the protests, is that young students have died, young men have died in these protests because of excessive force, the excessive use of force.
Richard, we were talking. I'm about to take a topical hard swerve here, but then I'll bring it back. We were talking a little bit a few days ago here on the show, a few episodes ago, about El Salvador and what's going on with cryptocurrency there, and not just making it official legal tender, but also, looking to utilize some of the energy coming off volcanoes to mine Bitcoin. I mean, just really, I'm going to call it wild stuff, really out there stuff. But people are saying, look what it's doing to El Salvador, potentially. It's got people talking there, political leadership there saying we're looking to draw Bitcoin entrepreneurs here. People are able to purchase citizenship there. I've heard it's something like 3 or 4 Bitcoin. If you want to purchase citizenship, you can instantly have citizenship there. And people are saying this could be, the beginnings of a new economy there. In one of the poorest countries in the region, this could provide some economic hope or some economic stimulus. And there's a deep dive you can do there. What's going on in Colombia right now where you say, hey, this is something or that's something where either Colombians or international investors might see promise? Where do you think the future of Colombia's economic and social health lies?
Well, yeah. First on El Salvador, just quickly, I don't know enough to really comment about it. Of course, I do worry about the authoritarian nature of the government.
Totally,
there, though, of course.
People are saying about the Bitcoin story. People are saying, it's not like this guy's a good guy. That's yeah.
And it does feel a little bit like it's smoke and mirrors there with this kind of announcement, because how much is what is the El Salvadorian economy based on? I do not know. I cannot comment on that. But in terms of Colombia has natural resources in not only sort of areas of outstanding national beauty and, of course, of great importance economically. So as soon as we get on the other side, let's say, of this COVID pandemic, this is the sleeping giant of tourism, of ecotourism. And I know that people in Costa Rica are incredibly worried about Colombia waking up from all of these years of slumber as a country in conflict, because it's just incredible here. I've written guidebooks about the country, and you can do anything here. That's the truth. But the other thing I would like to mention is, of course, is the medicinal marijuana market. And there are companies now sourcing that, and I do believe Canadian companies are quite involved in the medicinal marijuana market here in Canada, in Colombia. I don't know a lot about it, but I can say that's happening. And there are people, it won't happen for decades, but there are people trying to say, well, how about legalizing these illicit goods, not only medicinal marijuana, but also cocaine. We need to start, rather than legalizing it, regulating. If we can start regulating, we can start organizing these things. We take, first of all, the cash flow away from the cartels and from the gangs and so on. But we need to have this conversation. So we've got to, and that's obviously there's so much money involved that this entire industry infiltrates every level of society. And only the other day, there was a plane taken down on a Colombian island near to Nicaragua, which belonged to someone up in the high society. And of course, they're saying, oh, well, I lent my plane to someone else. Do we really believe that? And do we really believe that was the first flight? The former ambassador, the Colombian ambassador to Uruguay, had 3 cocaine laboratories found on his family farm, and he claims not to know about it. So we need to have a greater conversation about what's going on and where the money comes from in Colombia.
Richard McColl. By the way, what are the names your hotels are in? How do you say this? Mompos? Is that how you pronounce it?
That's right. It's a tiny town that's 5 hours south of the Caribbean coast of where Cartagena. It's on the Magdalena River, so it's a perfectly protected, isolated colonial town that really evokes the images of the literature of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and it's just something that's so magical that. Well, I invested there and bought these houses when Colombia was bleeding, and now, despite 2019 and 2020, we were doing incredibly well.
What are the names of your hotels? We want to pump your tires. When people are able to travel internationally again, where should they come stay?
Well, you said that. I've had guests from Fort McMurray, so there you go.
There you go.
The top end one is called the Hotel San Rafael, so you can find that www.sanrafaelmompox.com, and we opened that at the end of 2019, just in time to enjoy the pandemic. And then the other one we opened in 2008, which is called La Casa Amarilla, which is a more mid-range hotel there in Mompos. So we've got for everyone. There you go, and that's, you can see, very nicely decorated, very carefully restored to maintain the ambience and the originality of the colonial architecture.
Yeah, well, I'm picking out my poolside chair here. I'm just trying to decide where I'm going to sit. It's been too long.
It's hot.
Yeah,
it's hot.
Well,
okay?
hey,
it's hot.
I've got all the time in the world for that, and I know that some people, myself included, are pretty eager to be able to travel again and start exploring the world. In the meantime, we will stay tuned in to Colombia Calling. You can find that at colombiacalling.co. Richard McColl there, independent, a freelance journalist and podcaster, and of course, as you learned as well, an entrepreneur. Thank you so much for your insight here. We really appreciate your voice on this. As you present yourself on your website, The English Voice in Colombia, we're grateful for your perspective.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And just a thank you to all the listeners in Canada. I have great friends in Montreal. My father was from Winnipeg. My half-sisters are in Kelowna, so there you go.
Really? Oh, there you go. Hey, actually, before I go, this is my move, not on purpose. I wrap interviews and then I start the interview again. But okay. I have to ask you this in closing. I'm not sure if you know. So we're coming to you from our hometown of Edmonton, Alberta, and in Edmonton there's this private group. They're called the Prairie Sky, the company Prairie Sky Gondola. They want to put in a gondola, privately financed and privately owned, to span the North Saskatchewan River and kind of do what the High Level Bridge did, which is tie together Strathcona and Edmonton north of the river more than 100 years ago. Dreyfax is asking me, and I've heard this many times. As a matter of fact, I was involved back in the day with the gondola project. Everybody talks about Medellin and how their metro cable, commuter cable gondola system has really sort of set an example of how urban gondolas can work. And how they can actually be utilized, how it's not just sort of a publicity stunt or a fad. Have you seen it? Have you ridden it? Do you have any opinions on the value of an urban gondola?
Yes, absolutely. No, Medellin is a special circumstance because, of course, it's a very progressive city in that respect. And also, it's a U-shaped valley. So, of course, you've got the high rent areas, and then you've got the walls of the valley where what we call invasiones, or more like shanty towns. And these gondolas, these metro cables, have connected the poorer neighborhoods to where they work in the sort of better heeled neighborhoods. So it's been a real, it's been a socially, accepted and socially quite inventive manner of connecting the city. And so it's very cool. And in Bogota we have them as well, in the far south of the city, of course, and completely imitated from Medellin. It's an excellent solution, or part solution, because of course, how many people can you carry on a metro cable? How many people can you put in gondolas? But for the time being, it really has created a certain degree of urban regeneration and social involvement in barrios, neighborhoods, which were formerly overlooked and, of course, ignored.
Good stuff. Richard, thanks again so much for your time. Have a great week.
You too. Thank you for having me on the show, Ryan.
You got it. That's Richard McColl. He's the founder and the host of Colombia Calling. I encourage you to subscribe to that, most especially if you're interested. I've never been to Colombia. Has anybody in this room ever been to Colombia? Sarah, Sam, you've been? No? I've got to get down there. People talk about the beaches in Colombia, like some of the, people use this, people overuse world class, but if you take a look at images out of Colombia, and obviously Richard McColl has a pretty informed perspective on that. We're going to be talking about Alberta's curriculum. We're going to be talking about healthcare, Indigenous healthcare. We're going to be talking. I see some questions already coming in as well. Your vaccine questions. That's our segment coming up in about 50 minutes from now, 45 minutes maybe, with Dr. Kathy Dabrus out of Victoria. I've got to talk about this vaccine lottery in just a second, but really quickly, let me remind you that the teams at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge are very proud to bring you Alberta's best selection, bar none, of the Jeep lineup, and that includes that brand new Wrangler 4xE. This is the Wrangler EV. I've driven it a little bit. It's an absolutely amazing experience, almost completely silent. It's a dash switch, like how you might switch over from two-wheel to four-wheel drive. You just pop it into electric, and then off you go. It's really amazing. Of course, they're also looking forward to that Grand Wagoneer that's coming out this year. This is the Jeep re-entry into the luxury market, going head-to-head against the Escalades and all those other rides. The Grand Wagoneer, you'll find the best selection of them in St. Albert and at Sherwood Dodge. The team at Eden Landscaping, their teams have been busy over the past number of weeks, of course. This is their prime time, turning dreams into reality, backyard, front yard spaces. Whether you're listing your home, your realtor keeps talking to you about curb appeal, or maybe you've just picked up a new place, maybe you've built a new house, but the builder's giving you some pretty lousy or maybe super expensive options on landscaping your space. Steer clear of the cookie cutters. Look up the team at Eden Landscaping. You'll find them under the sponsors tab at ryanjesperson.com, or directly go to landscapeedmonton.ca. The team at Eden Landscaping's been at it for more than 20 years. Sarah Hoyle's the producer of this show, of course, keeping an eye on what's making news. And over the weekend, I didn't see it. I was off my phone. Fantastic. No notifications, no dings, no prompts, no check-ins. I'm hoping it brings down my average screen time for the week so I can feel better about it. But Alberta's Premier active over the weekend. This is a new, what's this vaccine lottery everybody's talking about?
So on Saturday, there was a big announcement. They were saying, hey, we're going to do three draws for $1 million each for folks that are getting vaccinated. So the first one closes soon. It's basically about, percentage and where we're at as far as cases. So, but I love it. Breaking. So, and then the next one closes on August 24th, and then the next one closes on September 23rd. And they're saying that they're going to be checking in and double checking with AHS to see, yes, are you in fact, you can register once, enter once, and they will be checking with AHS to just verify that, yes, you have been vaccinated.
Okay, and what's all the controversy about? So I saw some people were saying, so the deal was like, people thought if I got vaccinated 6 or 8 or 10 weeks ago, why am I not entered in the draw? And then there was some miscommunication. Now it turns out everybody's entered. Is that basically the gist of it? Was this kind of much ado about nothing? Is this a good? What's your sense of what?
The funny thing is they didn't actually have a lot of details published. They were like, don't worry. We'll
figure it out.
We'll figure it out. We'll announce it on Monday.
Okay.
And so now looking at their website, there's way more fulsome information, which is great. It's good to see that there's deadlines and eligibility and contest periods and prizes and et cetera, et cetera. But I think the first communication piece was, hey, if you haven't been vaccinated, now you should, because you're up for prizes. And so it was kind of like, wait a minute, so you're not actually rewarding the folks that were proactive and took this seriously and took the initiative to get the vaccine. We're only going to reward folks that have been vaccine hesitant. So I think that was the main criticism coming out of the gates.
I see. But then they've since amended it or clarified, I think is the word.
Sure, we'll say clarified.
Okay. I saw that our pals Bunsen and Beaker, the science canines, the science dogs, out of beautiful central Alberta, they tagged me in this. I just saw this now. Forget $1 million lottery for getting vaccinated. When we hit 80% vaccinated, say Bunsen and Beaker, we will head to parks in the summer for pets, hugs, selfies in fancy hats, science. We'll bring all the dogs we can find too, and maybe some llamas, some llamas they're going to bring. And here we have Bunsen and Beaker, just such good dogs,
14 out of 10.
There you have it, 14 out of 10, such good dogs. I think Bunsen, the name Bunsen Burner is a Bernese Mountain Dog. I think Beaker, Sam, do you remember correctly? They were on the show before. In a way, their human was on the show, but Beaker Beaker's a girl, I think. I was going to say some good
that is
boys, but I
correct.
think
Beaker is a girl.
But it's
she's a baby.
It's a platonic relationship, as we understand it. They cohabit. It's kind of like Three's Company. Nobody really kind of, but
will they? Won't they?
Will they? Won't they? What's
Rachel
going?
Ross.
Mr. Furley. What's going on? What's the deal with him? So there you have it. Okay, on first glance, maybe I'm missing something. I don't know. I just, and again, like when I get off the trail, like when we've got the trucks back up on the flat decks and we got the trailers all loaded up and everybody's heading home and hitting the highway, and then when you first hit reception, your phone's like ding, 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 ding. And it's not like the Vegas slot sound where you're like, yeah, it's more like, So the last thing I was going to do was go on to Alberta legislature Twitter and find out what everybody's absolutely furious at right now. And that's not taking away from people that are justifiably angry at government. That's not taken away from that. But I just thought there's something about this vaccine lottery. People are pissed about something. Honestly, you know what my thought is on it? And maybe I'm missing details. And again, I got back at 1 a.m. and I woke up at 6 and I just showed up here and tried to get up to speed. So maybe I'm missing something. Kind of like the idea. I kind of like. Do you say incenting or incentivizing?
I would say incentivizing.
You hear people say incenting, though, right? And you incent with an incentive.
Yeah, and if you're convinced by it, you're incensed to do something.
You're incensed.
Yeah.
And you are incented.
I think this one works either way.
Yeah. Well, whatever it is, incentivizing or otherwise, I think that it's actually, first of all, $3 million, again, people will clip me just saying this out of context. $3 million is nothing. It's not nothing. It's a lot of money, but it's also nothing, right? $3 million all in is like, what is it? 75 cents per Albertan all in. Now, that's a pretty overly simplistic way to look at it, but I'm not sure the criticism about, they're throwing cash at everything. To me, if a shot at $1 million prompts the 5 to 10% of people that are hesitant right now to get a vaccine for whatever reason. I'm not talking about hardcore anti-vaxxers. I'm talking about the people that are, as we would call them in any other political polling or any other political context, the undecideds, right? The ones that have not yet planted their flag, the ones that personal friends of mine, I'm tempted to use your names, but I love you, so I won't. But the people that are saying, I don't know. And my uncle sent me a video from Facebook and then Facebook took it down. And why would Facebook be taking the videos down unless they had something to hide? And it was developed quickly and it was rushed. And I heard this story about a guy that got sick and I'm just going to take more time and I just don't know.
I don't want forks sticking to me.
And I don't know. I don't want 5G and all the other stuff. Like a buddy of mine who's, Mom, I have adored for many years and is a wonderful lady. I'm not going to say his name or hers or even what city they live in, but she's gone full-blown bananas on 5G and vaccines.
Wow.
And she is otherwise an extremely and very reasonable person. And so I just for me, these are the folks that could take us from whatever, because Alberta seems to have hit a bit of a plateau right now with regards to vaccines, right? First doses. And whatever it takes, if you can bump like 5, 10, 15% of the population to take that step by investing $3 million. I mean, to put it into perspective, you see all these government ads when the government buys billboards, when they run ads on YouTube, like, before you're watching Real Talk or your favorite cat video, and all of a sudden the government of Alberta ad comes up, or you see targeted advertising on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or wherever. That costs money, and the government spends money on public messaging and public health. And to me, if it works, I don't think it's the worst idea in the world.
I agree. We're the second province to do it. Manitoba was the first one to launch an actual lottery. I mean, I think some of the criticism that I've seen is, well, we had Ralph bucks, so why do we need to do $3 million prizes? Why don't we do $1,000 and, spread that money around?
Everybody thinks that till they're the one that wins the million.
But also, how is the winner going to be chosen? I think there's some cynicism around. Yeah, how's this winner going to be picked?
Look at this. It's a donor out of South Calgary. No, who knows? And maybe, hopefully, that runs through the AGLC or something like that. I mean, I wouldn't put anything past anybody, but you never know. But the point is just to me, if everyone says we got to spread that prize money out equally, first of all, no. As mentioned earlier, if you do the math, and again, it's lazy math because someone will say, well, Ryan's taking the population at approximately 4.5 million, dividing it into 3 million, turns into 75 cents. Well, as far as I know, kids aren't paying taxes, Jesperson, you overly simplistic pleb and all these types of things. But if you're going to spread the money out evenly, what is it, 75 cents a person? Like, go get your vaccine and get your 75 cents. No one's doing that.
No.
$1 million. Albertans love their lotteries. Look at the Edmonton Oilers 50-50 draw. Once it was opened up online, once you didn't have to buy tickets at the game, it was opened up online. You notice every single game is like $250,000. I mean, and some of them are well over $1 million, and Albertans love lottos. They do. They love the opportunity to get, not just Albertans, people love it. It gets people's attention. Can you imagine all of a sudden you get a phone call and you got $1 million because you did the right thing and got a I honestly, unless I'm missing something, I don't mind it.
I guess I'm just annoyed at just watching all the money going out the door constantly, especially from a government that says that they are fiscally conservative.
Well, fair. 100%. And I think that's a completely, not a different conversation because this is an expenditure. But again, like if we're going to talk about $30 million a year to some idiotic war room or $3 million one time that let's say gets 75 or 200,000 more people vaccinated, I just, to me, there's a lot of things that government spends money on. A lot of them are really ridiculous, and some of them I think can have the potential to do something, and maybe this one can. I'm wide open to hearing other perspectives on this. Obviously, I would like to, on the record, state that Jesperson has called one of Jason Kenney's ideas a pretty good one, and I think that word should spread on the Alberta Legislature Twitter hashtag, measured, balanced, reasonable commentary, the trademark of Real Talk at ryanjesperson.com. Ding! The show is right here because our partners, like the team at Local Waste, have been with us out of the gates and continue to sustain the growth and the journey that's happening right here. These conversations, including opportunities to blow off a little bit of steam. The trash talk on Friday, one for the ages, I felt. It just means the bar has been raised for this coming week. If you have something you'd like to rant about, you know what to do. Send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com, and we'll consider it for the wrap-up to our broadcast week. That's coming up, of course, Friday, right before we say goodbye. Already thinking to Friday. The beauty of a short week. The beauty of a short week. The team at Local Waste wants to remind you, entrepreneurs in Edmonton, that there have been some shenanigans going on when it comes to emails from some of Local Waste's competitors. If you've recently got an email about a change in service, a new company trying to extend your waste management contract, and it smells fishy, do what you should do every time something stinks and you want to get to the bottom of it. Get rid of it. Get it out from underneath you. Call Mikkel, Lauren, or Chris at Local Waste. They'll help you get out of bad contracts. Integrity, one of their core corporate values. Also, big shout out today to the team at Grand Dog Essentials. We've told you that our dogs eat quality raw food, and it's because we were searching for solutions to digestive and other health issues for literally years. We found Grand Dog a few years ago, worked with their team of nutritionists, and we have not looked back. Sure doesn't hurt that they deliver to our door as well. If you're in Edmonton, Calgary, or Central Alberta, you can have the same experience. Plus, with the promo code REALTALK at granddog.ca, they'll take 10% off your first time order. Dr. Pamela Roach is an assistant professor in family medicine, director of Indigenous health education at the Cumming School of Medicine at the University of Calgary. She recently wrote a piece for the Canadian Medical Association Journal, and we're going to get into this, the potential health and social effects of Alberta's draft K-6 curriculum. Dr. Roach is Métis, originally from Manitoba, a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. Thanks for making time for us this morning.
No, thank you for the invitation, and thanks for having me.
Doctor, before we go any further, can I ask, this is, I'm not sure if you're expecting the question or not, but we're talking about this vaccine lottery that the province is rolling out in an effort to get more and more people on board with this. Do you see something like that at the surface level or deeper than that as a good idea, a troubling idea? What's your assessment of it?
You know, it was funny when you mentioned the Oilers 50-50. I totally bought tickets for the Oilers 50-50 draws. But I think what will get vaccines into arms is good. I think there was some maybe not great communication on being able to enter, and then, you know, when you win, going to get vaccinated, because in theory that could just mean we vaccinated 3 people who are now millionaires, as opposed to getting lots of people to go get vaccines. So I'm hopeful that maybe it might encourage enough people to go get vaccinated to keep our communities safe. And really, that's what's important to me. Doctor,
we're grateful that you've made time for us. Thanks for taking the question. We want to talk to you about this draft K-6 curriculum. I know for a lot of families, this is probably the number one thing on their radar outside maybe of COVID-19. But generally speaking, when it comes to their children's education, I don't think people care about anything more than they do about their kids' health and their kids' education. Now, you have a really unique perspective on this, considering your role as director of the University of Calgary's Indigenous health education. We've been having conversations about Indigenous healthcare, systemic racism in healthcare, some of the deplorable history of some of the so-called healthcare, we won't call it that, at residential schools, former residential schools. We've had those conversations last week. Before we get into the curriculum, I'm wondering if you can set the table for us for this discussion, your assessment of some of the systemic issues in the context of Indigenous healthcare across this country.
Yeah, absolutely. So I looked primarily at the social studies curriculum, and I do happen to have 2 elementary school age children in Alberta schools right now. So particularly personally important, but also just really important when I think of the bigger picture. And so the draft curriculum was released right around spring break for everybody, which I thought was lovely timing, considering the stress that teachers and parents had to deal with this year. A lot of us obviously spent what had hoped to be our downtime, really pouring through. And just in the social studies curriculum alone, I think I had like 150 little PDF sticky notes with notes to myself. And I think when we look at racism, I saw a lot of racism in the curriculum, but when we talk about racism, there's different types, right? And so it's not that there's explicit slurs in the curriculum or that there's, encouragement of actionable racism. Interpersonal racism is what we call it, but there's a lot of deeper racism that we're trained to not see. And those are things like referring to Indigenous people only in the past tense. And so when there was details around, the contributions, ongoing contributions to society, those refrained from ancient Rome, ancient Greek. What are their ongoing wonderful contributions to our contemporary society? And there was really nothing that framed Indigenous people as people who are, sitting in that classroom, teaching those children, operating in these school systems, in society at large. And that creates a societal look or narrative. And it just creates this understanding of Indigenous people that we see perpetuate harm throughout all our systems. And part of that, even, we look at the school names, that's been a hot topic. The Calgary Catholic School Board here in Calgary is still not making a statement on changing the name of Bishop Brandon, despite the news out of Kamloops, despite the news out of Brandon, despite the news out of Saskatchewan. They're still pushing back on it. And what that does is privilege one worldview over the real, tangible, ongoing harms that Indigenous people experience.
They can, on that Bishop Grannon note, I've been led to believe that there are bigger conversations happening because they're expecting sort of, with regards to the Catholic schools, a sweeping rebrand of several schools that bear that name of that former bishop. I'm not sure, but I will say this, is they can either rename it voluntarily or otherwise, but I have a sense that as this groundswell continues, that there's a pretty limited appetite for that name to remain stamped up on that Southwest Calgary school. People that are paying attention to our lineup today, or people that are downloading this podcast, are going to go, hang on a second, but like what's a prof in family medicine out of a school of medicine at a university talking about social studies curriculum? Where do you find the synergy there, Pam?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And so as an educator in higher education who also teaches around Indigenous health, part of my work is to increase the safety for Indigenous people within our health system. So my research is in health services and it's in our medical education as well. And so when we look at what prompts medical learners who will be future doctors to want to work with Indigenous communities and who want to learn how to work in good ways to improve the health of Indigenous people in those communities. We see a big influence in those choices is their socio-political views of Indigenous people that are formed before they even get to university, before they even get to undergrad. So those views are formed, sure, through families, through parents, through society, and a huge piece of that is the education that we actually get in school. So the more epistemic, that's the kind of racism I was talking about, that deep racism, the more of that shapes learners' views, the views of youth, the more work then has to be put in to try to disrupt those really biased racist views in order to be able to see that Indigenous patients are people, quite frankly. And we can see there's no denying the fact that there's a lot of harm that comes to Indigenous patients within our systems. And there's been multiple cases. Brian Sinclair died in a Winnipeg hospital emergency room waiting room because he was ignored. Joyce Echequan was murdered in Quebec in the fall of 2020. And that whole trial is just ongoing. We've all been seeing that and witnessing that at the same time as hearing about all of these children that have been found at the residential schools. And then we have, even in Alberta, we can't deny that it's here, right? There was a woman in Hanna, Alberta, who died on Boxing Day because she wasn't receiving treatment, and she's a First Nations woman. And so those attitudes and those really, really real, devastating impacts come because of the stories that our society tells us about Indigenous people.
Parents are going to be watching this, or you don't have to be a parent, I don't think. I mean, to hear your assessment of this curriculum as racist, people are going to say, well, hang on a second. I mean, if that is indeed the case, there's no way that this can be tolerated, let alone taught, right? In other words, like as a parent myself, I'm going to go, I'm not going to have my child subjected to this. When it comes to the racism that you see, I'm realizing this is an extremely loaded question, but let me just ask it on purpose because it demands an answer. Do you think it's intentional or otherwise?
So we do know that there was Indigenous consultation in the development of the curriculum. Those people that were involved in the consultation have since come out to say, you did not listen to me, you didn't listen to our guidance, this is not how we told you that you should be including Indigenous voices, this is not what Indigenous inclusion looks like. And so to have that and to completely ignore it is not only completely disrespectful, particularly for the time of Indigenous people and elders who were involved, but also it's hard to feel that it wasn't intentional. And when I think about the people who are included in the writing of the social studies curriculum, the editor of the Dorchester Review, and I'm sure by flagging that, I may be making myself a target, for some of the fans of that.
You're talking about Chris Champion is who you're talking about.
I am. Yeah, and who's a residential school denier who uses quotation marks around the word survivor. And actually those quotation marks did make it into the curriculum. So bearing in mind, there will be the children and grandchildren of residential school survivors sitting in Alberta classrooms who are having their families' experience completely erased and devalued is unacceptable.
Yeah, I mean, let me just reiterate and circle back to point out that I read that twice in your piece. Again, we're talking to Dr. Pamela Roach, the potential health and social effects of Alberta's draft K-6 curriculum. You can read the full piece at cmajblogs.com, cmajblogs.com. The fact that there are quotations around the word survivors when you're talking about residential schools, to me, is appalling. It's abhorrent. It's disgusting. I mean, this is past the point of somebody having a, we'll agree to disagree type scenario about some, smear on our history. I mean, this is, to me, absolutely unacceptable. So where do you see this going? I mean, in my opinion, I've said I think that the curriculum is going to be one of the major I think that that's an election issue 2 years from now, because it's the type of thing that endures, right? This is you can take a look at the government and say, COVID-19 by 2023 will be a distant memory and the economy will be bouncing back. Or you can take a look at some of the other things, maybe the shut down coal mining in the Rockies and maybe walk that back, and people have short memories, which is true. And that'll feel like ancient history. But the curriculum, to me, is a bit of a different story. And not just that there's not been meaningful consultation. I mean, you talk about Grand Chief Billy Joe Labucan saying he felt like the, quote, token Indian on the consultation process. He has withdrawn his endorsement of the curriculum. The government either walks it back because it acknowledges that it's a disaster, a plagiarized, shallow disaster, or it pushes forward on this, which is even worse. I mean, what do you think the implications are?
I think the implications are huge. And I, as an Indigenous mother whose Indigenous children go to school, it makes me sick to think that despite the fact that I think it's the high 90% of school boards have rejected it, that it will be pushed forward in 2022 regardless. And I think even with the news coming out of Kamloops that has been very traumatizing, very distressing for many people, and the ongoing news, we know that there's going to be more. And I've still continued, despite that, to see the government defending this curriculum and pointing to, no, we included conversations about residential schools, but they didn't. They included conversations about American boarding schools, which is what they were called in the United States, not Canadian residential schools, and only starting in grade 5. And the TRC calls for the government at all levels to include this teaching from kindergarten. And so I think the implications are for so many reasons. There's lots of elementary school educators who don't feel that it's developmentally appropriate. There's factual errors, but the implications for the ongoing harm for Indigenous people, for people to learn this, the fact that the word traitor is still included. I grew up in Alberta. I remember learning that my ancestors were viewed as traitors by the government. And I hated it. And then I was expected to get up in front of my class and talk about my family tree, right? Like it's so harmful to Indigenous people. And the fact that it's still there means that these views will be perpetuated, which means that in all of our systems, our social care systems, our healthcare systems will continue to harm and kill Indigenous people.
Michelle in our live chat says people need to realize that just because school boards, the majority of them, have said no to piloting this curriculum, the government will likely still ram the curriculum draft through. This is still a big issue. What do you make of Alberta's Education Minister, Adriana LaGrange, claiming that she's being bullied through all of this?
I think asking for feedback and accepting it is not really the same as being bullied. I think, I, as an educator, I get feedback all the time. I don't feel like if my students are unhappy with something that I'm doing, that's bullying. I feel that she has asked for feedback from parents, from teachers, from school boards. She's received it. And I don't think it's what she wanted. And I think that's not bullying. That's just people really genuinely concerned for their children's education and for having to teach to teach this curriculum that they're not comfortable with. So I would say that it's not bullying. It's just not the feedback she was hoping for.
How early? I mean, it's very interesting to me to the government. You've said residential schools. The curriculum touches on that for the first time in grade 5. What is that about? If I remember correctly, that's about 3 years after kids have been learning about Genghis Khan and the Silk Road and the establishment of different levels of government or different styles of governance around. I mean, it's just absolutely mind blowing. But what would an age appropriate focus on Canada's history, the federal government's history with Indigenous people, including things like residential schools, the 60s scoop, etc. How early do you think students should start learning about this? What does age-appropriate content look like? If you were drafting it, if you were designing it, what would it look like?
So, so first of all, to answer the when does it start? Kindergarten, I think. And this is said in response to those comments quite a lot. But at Kamloops, there was children as young as 3 years old in that grade. And if my children are old enough to know about it, if Indigenous children were old enough to be taken from their families to be put in residential schools, then children are old enough to learn about it. As far as age appropriate content, there's lots of stuff out there. There's a lot of books, a lot of children's books by Indigenous authors that could be included. Orange Shirt Day happens every year. So I don't understand how we're going to have Orange Shirt Day and not talk about it. So I think there's a lot of ways that we can talk about it. My own children are in grade 2 and grade 4. And so we've always talked about residential schools, and my son, who's in grade 2, is very aware of what they mean and can have these conversations. And it doesn't mean that you talk about every single thing that happened when they're 6 or 7 years old, but it means that they understand that for the sheer reason that these children were Indigenous, they were taken from their families to try to no longer be Indigenous, right? So I think that's a bigger conversation, and I certainly see that there's a shift. More of the university students know more about residential schools than perhaps a few years ago, but many people don't. I have many sort of friends and people that I know who are adults who don't know anything. That the number of people who were shocked at the news from Kamloops means that we're not doing a good enough job at large in society of telling these stories.
What's one thing, Doctor, that you would like to see nationwide as a result of this? Do I say an epiphany, an awakening? I don't know what. Every word I use to describe these grisly and horrifying discoveries at former residential schools across Canada as we all brace ourselves for more, or at least a very uncomfortable and important process over the next number of years here. It'll prompt conversations about many different things, I think, including things like community resources for First Nations communities. I think we'll have conversations on what justice looks like. I think we're going to have conversations about, things like water and nutrition and mental health supports for remote northern communities. And there's so many conversations that need to be had. What's one thing that you hope that you're really paying keen attention to, that you hope is impacted change-wise as a result of this, I'm going to say national mourning, because that's what it feels like. What do you hope to see?
Well, I hope to see some honest conversations about Canada's history. I think we can all recognize that we live in a society. But I guess like the everything that we have came at a very significant price for certain groups. So I want people to take that, they feel awful, people feel guilty, they feel ashamed, they feel distressed, but take that and don't just feel guilty and ashamed and distressed. Act on something, read the TRC and see which calls speak to your life. So if you're involved in sports, there's sports related calls to action. If you're involved in your kid's school, read the calls to action around education. There's something in there that everybody can act on, and to really, really be led and listen to Indigenous voices, right? We know that people have been doing, we had the Royal Commission in the 90s, we have the TRC, it's there. People have been speaking out for decades. And what we need people to do is actually just read it and talk to people and act and realize that they're not, feeling guilty about it doesn't make you the center of the story. What we need to do is create better systems. So we need to create better education systems. First Nations children's education is chronically underfunded, right? Which then impacts, if we think about how to improve Indigenous people's health, which is what I lead to, then we need, we need more Indigenous healthcare professionals. But to do that, we need to be able to have well-funded educational systems for Indigenous youth, where they can access and feel safe coming to post-secondary, where they can feel safe doing high school diplomas, where they're supported to do all of these things. And we're led by the needs of community and by the community's voice, not by what a Western institution thinks they should be doing.
Dr. Pamela Roach is director of the University of Calgary's Indigenous Health Education, assistant professor in family medicine at the Cumming School of Medicine at the University of Calgary, obviously a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta, originally from Manitoba. You can read her piece in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, published April 27th. Again at cmajblogs.com. Anything, Pam, just in closing, has your opinion changed? I mean, April 27th, you put that out there. This is more than coming up on 6 weeks ago. Has your opinion changed on anything since then? I should have asked you that first.
No,
not
at all. And I think the defense of it, I think if there was a willingness to say, hey, we screwed up, let's revisit this, let's try to figure out where we can improve it. But it's just been a constant defense, and I've not seen improvements. And I've not seen a willingness to change. So for me, it's very, very risky and very detrimental curriculum to implement.
Dr. Pamela Roach, thanks for your time. It's great to have you on the show. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's kind of an ongoing theme, right? Like, if only this government would have acknowledged that the lack of consultation was harming the end product and would have walked it back and humbly acknowledged that to Alberta citizens, and you kind of smirk and go, yeah. The team at Westworld Computers has this studio powered, and they've been powering workplaces and private residences for more than 40 years. A family-owned business going head-to-head against that big box store. I'm talking about the Apple store, of course. Westworld's got the full Apple lineup, the full Mac lineup, and, of course, their team of service techs have seen it all over their more than 4 decades. You've got to, whether it is your MacBook or your iMac or your iPad, just not performing like you know it should, or maybe there's a full-blown technical catastrophe, you can book your appointment right now at westworld.ca or walk right in there. If you end up going with a new unit, they'll transfer all your data over free of charge. You can learn more at westworld.ca. The team of the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park have let us know that they are ready for the onslaught. They're ready for the flood of Real Talkers that are going to be hitting them up for the Father's Day cakes. That's right, the Father's Day cakes heading into this weekend. $5 off so long as you drop my name, Jessica, or mention Real Talk at the Dairy Queens of Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, Y Gardens, and Baseline Road. $5 off your Father's Day cake, which includes the layers of vanilla soft serve, chocolate soft serve, and their famous cookie and fudge center. That is what I hit up. I attack it like an animal. I attack it like a lioness on the Serengeti looking to feed her entire pride. That is me on the Dairy Queen cake.
Do you split it so you can get the cookie crumble first? It's kind of, I feel it's like an Oreo. Everyone has a different approach to it.
It is. There's a different approach to it. We should specify and clarify that. Oh no, Dairy Queen has Oreo for the blizzards and stuff like that. We can keep it going. I thought perhaps I should end the official promotional spot to begin promoting for free another product.
No.
No, but Dairy Queen, you can get to me the Oreo blizzards. I realize
it's the OG.
It's the OG. I'm opening up a can here, but as far as I'm concerned, the Oreo blizzard is where it's at. I had it. There's the Oreo double stuff, right? Everybody familiar with the double stuff?
No.
What? Oh, Hoyles. That's just me. That's not even the part I'm telling you about. The Oreo double stuff is like what it sounds like. It's like double the stuffing, double of the white stuff with between those two chocolate cookies. The Oreo.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's the double stuff. Now there's the mega stuff. The Oreo mega stuff. And I was like, how much more mega can you get than the double stuff? It turns out there's a lot of room for improvement. The only difference is with the Oreo mega stuff, if you get the bag, you're going to note that you get much fewer cookies, of course, because there's that much more. But it's kind of like, it feels like almost like a tripled up. Anyway, all of this to say, go get your Father's Day cake at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Speaking of Dairy Queen cakes, so I do think that there are different ways to eat them. And one of the things I'll acknowledge is that you have that with the Dairy Queen cake, you have that the exterior. Everybody knows around the perimeter, they have that whipped cream that kind of goes along the bottom. And then you have all the stuff on the top, like the colored icings and things like that. And people like that. I don't care about any of that stuff. That to me is only a barrier that must be overcome to get to that chocolate fudge center. That's me. So if I'm like, I'm kind of an interesting... If you pay attention, if it's like a late night party with mostly adults there,
Yes.
and there's a Dairy Queen ice cream cake, and then everybody else has lost interest and walked away, I will be the guy still at the table hammering away at that Dairy Queen cake.
We don't want it to go to waste.
No, and it's melting. So
Yeah,
you got to get to it. You got to get to it like right freaking now. So I see this email in my inbox, talk@ryanjesperson.com. It's Doug, and it says, Ryan, I'm glad that you had a good break. I cannot agree with you less on the lotto vac. Is that what they're calling this? The vaccine lotto? The vaccine raffle? It's a raffle. It's not really a lottery. Nobody's buying tickets.
Well, people are, making the play on words from Lotto Max to
Lotto Vax. Lotto Vax. I think that's brilliant. Good. Doug says, had there been a consistent and coherent message from government regarding masking and vaccines, this lotto would likely not be required. Says a requirement to show your vaccination prior to admission to the stampede could easily address the problem. Yeah, but Doug, that's not going to happen for a million reasons. He says, I do agree with you that it's 75 cents a head if you were to just reward everybody. Nobody's motivated. Perhaps if vaccination lag is a problem, use data to identify who's not getting vaccinated and focus there. If it's young adults, then maybe free tuition or gift cards supporting local businesses. Yeah, but... He says, finally, if Jason Kenney and his liquor cabinet, which is my most favorite thing of all time, could actually use the public service to develop strategies to address issues as opposed to the current incoherent, seemingly impaired thought process, policy and action could be put in place that the Alberta public could easily support. So welcome back. We missed you. And he says, and I'm thinking this is not the last you'll hear about this UCP Gong Show. Cheers from Doug. Where does he really, free tuition? Like, free to how many people? Like all of a sudden this goes from a $3 million incentive to a $350 million incentive?
No. You just look at if we're targeting, so we actually take the data, we have the data, who's getting vaccinated, who's not. If it's not university-aged folks, then make sure that it's, there's if you are a full-time returning student or maybe you're enrolled at a university, then we will pay for X number of tuitions for up to $3 million. No, so that's a lot of tuition. That is a lot of tuition.
Well, sure it is. But then what about all the other people that are what about all the other people? I don't think of all, I don't think it's young university students that are not getting vaccinated.
That was an example. But right. What we're saying is it's not like a shrapnel type approach where we're just like, we'll just see who this hits. Who knows?
That's the best part to do it. That's the best way to do it.
No, but if we use data, then we could actually do a targeted approach, and it would be more focused and effective.
This to me is a shotgun approach that I think. I mean, am I coming across as like the pro-government guy here? I don't understand. Like, if you want to say, well, let's have incentives so it can be like free tuition. Well, that's what $1 million will allow you to do. I mean, I think like $1 million, whether you say like who is vaccine hesitant. Now, this is painting with huge, broad brushes. Okay, huge, broad brushes. But who's not getting vaccinated? Like people that have, hesitancies around these types of things as is, right? So you got that crew. You've got the crew that worries about things like they're injecting 5G or they're injecting microchips or, these planes flying ahead or, they're what's the word I'm looking for again? The chemtrails and the fluoride in the water. And you've got those kind of, quite frankly, Looney Tunes. And then you've got the crew that's kind of like the otherwise reasonable, but they've got somebody in their ear chirping at them and misleading them. These are a couple of my friends whose spouses are doing unbelievable damage, and we've recognized their spouses to be mouth breathers on pretty much everything else. So I'm not sure why they're getting any credibility on videos that they've sussed out on Facebook. I've said this a million times, but I need to pick the brains. We should do a documentary. I need to pick the brains of people that honestly, for whatever reason, believe that the smartest doctors, immunologists, virologists, and researchers in the world have not had the thought's not occurred to them to go on Facebook and to search these videos like these people have done the digging and done the research, and they've turned this up where they're all of a sudden the years of experience and the medical expertise and all these types of things, like doctors. I heard from a buddy the other day, my buddy Clint, his dad just had a successful surgery. He's had a tremor. And they went in, and the doc went in the back, and as his dad stayed awake so he could talk to the doctors through this neurosurgery, they cut a 2-inch by 2-inch square out of the back of his skull, popped it open, in Clint's words, like a jack-o'-lantern, and went in there and installed a probe into his brain. And they were talking to his dad because it was obviously, this is very sensitive stuff. And so they're saying to his dad, okay, can you feel this, or what impact is this having on you? They said, don't panic. You're going to lose your sight for a second. Boom. He said it was like the lights went out. They prodded this one little part of the brain, and the lights went out, and then lights came back on again, and this, that, and the other. And now he's got this little unit. I mean, not like a pacemaker, but something like that embedded under his skin. In Clint's words, like a half deck of smokes. So it gives you a sense of the size. So
I like Clint.
Oh, Clint's a beauty. Clint's rig is Shakes, which is the big white Dodge. You can see the photo of it if you check out my Instagram post from today about the family wheeling trip. But Clint, we ran into him out there, and this is where I learned about his dad's surgery. I was thrilled to hear it. I have a vested interest because my dad's got a bit of a tremor, and we're all curious about this type of stuff. So anyway, the point of this is to say we have physicians and surgeons and researchers and basically the smartest people on planet Earth that can go in and cut into a skull and poke and prod around a brain and install something and solve a tremor. And we have researchers that can attack cancers at micro levels, and we have designers and researchers that can go in for people that have lost limbs or experienced amputations and come up with these prosthetic limbs that are just unbelievable. And we have all of this advancement and all of these amazing, mind-blowing things, and yet drunk Uncle Larry found a video on Facebook and figures that he's smarter than everybody. And, one of the classic ones we heard about this weekend, well, why does anybody think there hasn't been any common cold? Why does anybody think there hasn't been the flu this year, huh? Anybody think that that's a little bit suspicious? Yeah, dummies. Everybody's wearing masks and isolating and hand sanitizing every 30 seconds. Why the hell do you think that hasn't? To me, it drives me absolutely crazy. So you're going to touch that with this shotgun approach. You're going to hit those folks where all you need is that tiny little prompt, that one little thing where you go, hey, I'll tell you what, $1 million. I'm kind of on the fence anyway. $1 million, sure. But then what do you have? You have some folks in rural communities that are adverse to this because at the coffee shops or talking over the fence. You've got those conversations where I don't know, they're not getting it. I don't think I'm getting it. Plus, we haven't seen a lot of it in our community. You've got evangelicals, right? I mean, there's going to be a ton of evangelicals that'll write in right now and say, hey, hang on a second. Let's not treat us unfairly. But I will say anecdotal evidence based on what I'm seeing, even in my personal friend circles, that is a reality, like it or not. And I'd be happy to have that conversation with anybody. I mean, and I could list 15 or 20 more communities or more groups that I think are vaccine hesitant where I think this could work. I don't think that we have this big, huge thing right now where it's like post-secondary. I mean, that's just an example. That was what Doug put in his email. Oh, post-secondary students are the number one problem area.
But this is, to me, I think we're speaking the same language in that there are specific groups that anecdotally you're speaking about. We also have data about what communities, where the uptake of vaccines is happening and where it is not. So focus our energies, focus the dollars, the promotion, the marketing, the different sites. So we are actually targeting those locations and those folks. So to me, I feel like we're saying the same thing, but maybe our approach.
Well, it's fine. I think. Oh, sorry, I cut you off. I didn't mean to.
I think I was done.
I feel like quite honestly, just speak frankly, I think that a lot of people right now would love to poke holes in anything that this government does. I mean, Wally right now in our live chat's right. Wally says, I think that this is a good idea. And if another party came up with the idea, they'd be lauded for it. I think people are trying to, this is why some of us would make lousy politicians. Because quite frankly, friends, I say this in love. But I think a lot of people are trying to overcomplicate this. Why overcomplicate it? There's 3 stages, 3 grabs for $1 million. And if you're vaccinated by the time that draw is made, and if you've registered online, then you'd be entered to win. I mean, to me, I hope that it bumps up our numbers by 10 or 15%. I think that would be great.
I guess time will tell. We'll see what it does.
Yeah, I agree.
I hope. I mean, I really wish that we didn't have to get to this point, and we didn't have to get to this point.
Sure, but I mean, but here we are. Right?
And I like, point taken. Yeah, I don't want to be like, hindsight's always 20/20 and yada yada. Like, yes, absolutely. But I also don't want to avoid or negate the fact that we didn't have to be here.
But we are here. I agree with you, but we are here. And so now it's a question of what do we do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Joe on the live chat says, as far as UCP ideas go, this one isn't their worst. So Joe says, but the bar is pretty low. Patrick says, I'd rather have a $3 million lottery or whatever you want to call it. People want to call it a raffle or whatever you want to call it. I'd rather have that, he says, than spending that much on hospital beds and ICU, because of COVID. Genevieve says, wouldn't more prizes be more appealing? Maybe a $500,000 a piece or $200,000, spread the love. Sure. But I just think like $1 million is such a great, I mean, it's an easy one. Sure. I mean, we could pick it apart. Should we do 30 prizes of $100,000? Inside, I'm just like so proud of myself that I was able to do that math on the fly, and I'm just desperately hoping that it's correct. And some random guy says, I jump back and forth in support or opposition to the lottery. You're probably not alone. I mean, maybe I'd be the same way. Maybe I'll hear some compelling cases later on, and maybe I'll change my mind. But right now, I don't mind it. I think whatever gets people stuck, what do you want to call it? Jabbed, pricked, whatever you want to call it, that to me works. Scott says, you do talk about these communities, these groups that were experiencing vaccine hesitance. Says, what about people who watch Joe Rogan? Yeah, probably. People who watch or listen to Joe Rogan for medical advice should probably find a physician, right? One of our listeners, I don't know who it is, but someone said, Ryan, the plural of anecdote is not data, which is fair, which is why I acknowledge when I'm sharing an anecdote, I say, this is anecdotal. But really, does somebody want to dig their heels? I mean, the caveat that I just issued, the anecdotal note was that I think that in certain communities, there's significant vaccine hesitance, and one of those is among evangelicals. I will have that conversation all day long, because that to me has been one of the fascinating storylines. People are, I won't write a book on this someday. I would love to do a documentary on this someday of the last 5 years and what has happened specifically in the United States, but not just the state of evangelical Christianity. Two things, I think: the presidency of Donald Trump and the response to COVID-19. I just think the damage that has been done to the reputation and the brand of evangelicalism, that's another story for another day.
A real talk documentary.
Well, but in all seriousness, I'm not sure if people know this, but Real Talk is the flagship program of our company, Relay Communications, and I will absolutely have all day for conversations on producing feature-length documentaries. That's something I'd really like to do.
I've always wanted to shoot a doc. I'm in.
Yeah,
you're in.
Love it.
Let's do it.
Well, I just think that's a story that begs to be told, and I think that. People are writing books on that, and I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation. This is not an attack on Christianity. This is not an attack on God. This is not an attack on your faith or your right to practice your faith. But some things to me are undeniable, and we have witnessed that there. We're going to talk to a family doc, Dr. Kathy Dabrus, in just a second. She is participating in a campaign called Victoria Family Doctors Counter Vaccine Hesitancy. That's coming up in just a second. First, I wanted to remind you about powered.ca. This is an amazing program launched by Athabasca University. It is entirely online, on-demand learning. Your opportunity to broaden your skill set, your opportunity to set yourself up for job market reinvention. They've got courses like Digital Wellness 101. We've talked about that in past. Allyship and inclusion, AI and machine learning. You have to go check out the website to learn more about the offerings there. Powered.ca. Some of these courses, 2-3 hours. You don't have to clear a week or a month to prepare yourself for future success and just broaden your level of understanding. It's powered.ca. by Athabasca University. Also, a big shout out to the team at Campers Village. We told you just last week how thrilled we were to onboard them as Real Talk builders. You know, Albertans, Canadians have been going to Campers Village for years for all of their camping needs. But did you know they're not just about camping? Campers Village is all about getting outdoors. So whether that's your family doing car camping, backcountry camping, whether it's a day at the lake or the cabin, or maybe even gear for your own backyard, visit Campers Village. You can find them 2 stores in Edmonton, 1 store in Calgary, and online at campers-village.com. They ship across Canada. Most orders over $49 ship for free at Campers Village. Dr. Kathy Dabrus is a family physician with the Victoria Division of Family Practice in a beautiful Vancouver Island. Has been involved, the doctor has, in full-service family practice in Victoria since 1989. Past president of the local chapter of the Federation of Medical Women and a clinical instructor in the UBC Island Medical Program. Doctor, thanks so much for making time for us, and a good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You bet. We've been buzzing a little bit here, just as light chatter about this incentive from the Alberta government, and we've seen these, as mentioned, in Manitoba and other jurisdictions as well. Down in the U.S., they're giving away cash and guns and all kinds of things to people who get their first or second doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. At a surface level, where we can dive in as deep as you like, are these campaigns a good idea? Do you think they're effective?
I think whatever gets vaccines into patients' arms is what we need to do. At the Victoria Division of Family Practice, we're recognizing that in our community, the vaccination rate is currently at about 75%, which sounds really good. And yet, from my perspective, I'm going 1 in 4 people have not taken the opportunity to get a vaccination. And certainly, when I'm chatting with my patients during the day, about every 4th patient, when I ask them, have you had your COVID vaccination, kind of stumbles a little bit and says, no, I'm not sure it's the right thing for me. So we certainly still have a lot of vaccine hesitancy in the community, and we certainly want to get at all aspects of that. And there are many different ways of doing that.
Doctor, I'm grateful that you've agreed to join us here. We're going to be keeping an eye on our live chat for people that are watching us live on YouTube right now, plus monitoring our hashtag RealTalkRJ, and we'll have some questions, I'm sure, coming in from audience members about vaccines and sort of up to the minute type stuff, like the 2 different manufacturers for the 2 different doses. That interesting storyline that surfaced a while ago. Generally speaking, when you're talking to people that have not yet been vaccinated, I would imagine you're hearing a myriad of reasons why. Are you detecting any common themes, and if so, do you think those could be addressed?
Yeah, so one of a couple of common themes. One is that people seem to have some concern potentially about the safety of the vaccines kind of going forward, because they go, well, they're a new vaccine, it's a new technology. I'm kind of worried about that. But when I speak to people, I let them know that vaccine technology, actually our understanding of how vaccines work started in the 1700s. So this is nothing brand new. In the beginning, we used to actually immunize the entire people by taking a part of the entire virus and putting it into the system and hoping it wouldn't make you sick, but give you that immunity. But over the last several hundred years, we've been able to refine the vaccine technology to get to the point where we know that we can get to the smallest particle that will induce immunity for people, and a way of knowing that immunity can last a very long time. So not just making you immune for a few weeks, but giving that longer term immunity. And that's part of where we have these 2-dose vaccine schedules, because we understand kind of how to get that longer term immunity.
I've got an interesting comment here from The Watcher, who says, I think at this point there should be negative consequences for non-vaccination as opposed to positive consequences for vaccination. This is an interesting one. I mean, we're hearing conversations about what certain workplaces may be doing. People have implications, obviously, they're looking at when it comes to international travel or otherwise. People are talking about things like vaccine passports, et cetera. Where do you land on that? What's appropriate, what you think would be effective, and what you think maybe the future should look like?
the biggest risk or the biggest downside of not getting vaccinated with with a COVID vaccination is getting sick with COVID-19 and dying. That's your big potential consequence. If you're sort of thinking beyond myself, there are beyond the individual scope. We do see so many patients who are on cancer chemotherapy. They've had transplants. I have many of my patients come to me regularly, really fearful about people who are not getting vaccinated. They've had their vaccines, but we know the vaccines may not take as effectively in our cancer immune suppressed patients, our transplant patients, and things like that. So for them, the world is still a pretty scary place when they're around people that are not immunized. But the big message for if you are not immunized, the biggest risk to you is to get COVID-19 and to die from that.
I hate to say it, doctor, because you're absolutely right. And that should be enough of an incentive. But for a lot of people, probably the entire reason that they're not getting vaccinated is because they don't take COVID-19 seriously. Is there a certain element of the population that we're just never going to reach? I mean, do we have to look at that and consider that to be some sort of a, I don't know, to use an accounting phrase, do you just write that off? I mean, how do you address that?
I think we address it in kind of a multi-prong effect. Certainly there has been the public health messaging and shows such as this, which try and answer people's questions. I do encourage people in our community. We have a number of people who don't have a regular family doctor, but your family doctor will know your health, your personal health risks, and know what's going on in your community. In BC, we have a number of patients who don't have a family doctor. So we've developed the Pathways Medical Care Directory online that will link people to a family doctor to discuss their individual and personal risks. So a multi-pronged approach certainly works. You know, when we're looking at assisting people with quitting smoking, there's no one size fits all. The motivation for each person is a little bit different, but certainly working with your own family doctor, not being afraid to talk to them about what your concerns are. We don't judge people for not having had a vaccination. We're actually deeply concerned and want to actually get at what is at the heart of that concern there, and is there a way we can work through that, work with that, to get to the other side of feeling safe and having a vaccine, and then being safe in your community.
Yeah, a friend of mine got vaccinated only because, he's made it very clear, only because he has to be able to travel to see the woman that he loves. And my opinion on that is I don't care if he's ever 100% on board on believing everything. I don't care the reason why he got vaccinated. I'm just happy that he did get vaccinated. I don't think I've got all the time in the world for people. I said to a friend over the weekend over text, we're going back and forth, and I said, I don't think that vaccine hesitancy is automatic reason to pile on anybody. As a matter of fact, I think for a lot of people, being hesitant around this vaccine is entirely understandable. People are trying to wrap their minds around something that's been developed in a relatively short period of time. I don't think it's been rushed, but I think it's been expedited. But I think it's okay to have questions about these types of things. And I think if we act as though we don't need to address people's concerns or have segments like this, thanks to you being willing to share your expertise, then I think it could come across as a little bit shady. I've got time for these conversations. That's why we have them.
Exactly. So I can tell you that family doctors are very interested in getting all of their patients immunized. We're in the business of patient safety, and we want all of our patients to be safe and to be immunized. And on an individual basis, we're able to address not only their health concerns, but perhaps their psychological concerns in terms of safety for vaccine, and able to look at resources we may have online in our community. One of my patients, had a concern. Someone had mentioned to them that perhaps this vaccine may bring out some epilepsy symptoms. And so, as a family doctor, I knew where to look for reliable information in terms of the Epilepsy Foundation of America, the Epilepsy Foundation of Canada, to get the information, even speaking to one of our local neurologists who was able to assure us that COVID vaccination has no association with that. So we want to have a trusted individual to be able to dispel some of the myths, but also to go to trusted resources to be able to get the answers for you. So it's okay to have questions about things, but the person to talk to is your family doctor, because they understand your specific situation. And as I say, we're very interested. We're in the business of keeping people well.
I'm very conscious, doctor, and I'm very aware that I've said to you 5 or 6 times here, I've got a buddy that, or I was talking to a friend about, but these are just real life conversations. These are conversations that have actually happened, and this is how my worldview somewhat is being shaped, right? Our view is shaped by the people around us. This friend of mine is a courageous and incredible young woman who has bravely battled cancer and has used some unconventional and untraditional methods to fight that cancer, which has given her a certain type of confidence. And she claims that her family doctor has told her that she should not get the vaccine. I leave that alone. I was not in the room, the examining room. I find it hard to believe. Is there anybody that should not be getting vaccinated, in your opinion?
So I can't comment on that specific situation because, of course, there'll be very specific details. Yep. But we are vaccinating everybody, our transplant patients. We are expediting referrals in case of possible allergy. So currently, even people who are allergic to certain components of the vaccine, we are expediting consultations with allergists to mitigate that risk of allergy. So it doesn't mean even if you have potentially an allergic reaction, we can pre-medicate you if we know ahead of time that you're going to have this exposure and manage you through that medically so that you can safely have the vaccine. So I'd have to say in general, I don't know of any contraindication to the vaccine, or meaning a person who should not have the vaccine. That being said, it is an individual conversation if there are those kinds of concerns between the patient and their own physician in terms of what their own personal risks are. But by and large, we can work around anything that you're worried about in terms of having vaccination, from allergy to reaction to long-term kinds of risks. For many patients, they look to a question they ask me is, well, would you do this? And it's kind of like, absolutely, done both my shots and excited to get both of those shots. And so is our family practice community and every physician in the community and all of our medical practitioners in the hospital, just like excited about the day that they can get their second shot and things like that. So sometimes people are worried about their own situation. Sometimes people are feeling, you know what, I don't actually have to do this. I'm kind of off the hook because we'll probably have herd immunity. So, there's enough people vaccinated that I'll be okay. But the borders will open. And in the United States, we have a 60% vaccination rate. We saw how quickly this virus traveled around the world in a matter of weeks. It is a very fast traveler. So as our borders open and we have variants coming or the virus coming from other parts of the world, I know right now in our own little communities, we actually feel quite safe, but the world will open up and you will have continued exposures for years to come. I have a sense from some patients that they feel it's just going to go away, but this is a global issue. And if you go to other parts of the world, in Asia, the virus is rampant and will continue to be until we have 2 shots in everybody's arms. And so again, we've kind of been through a year and a half of managing things here, and we are doing well, but good may not be good enough in terms of protecting our community from subsequent waves, because this is a global issue.
Doctor, we've got some great questions here from viewers, from listeners, people tuning in live on the Mixlr audio app. Lala Zaz is watching on YouTube, says there's this big batch of Moderna that's coming in just in time for second doses, those of us who hit the big batch of Pfizer on the first dose. But Lala Zaz says, but I don't want to mix. We've received word that mixing the vaccines, mixing manufacturers is cool. Public health authorities are saying, don't worry about it. Are you confident in that message?
Yes, I'm confident in that message. The research and the trials have been done. What we see is when you switch vaccines, that there may actually even be a subtle advantage because your immune system is being primed in two different ways to give it maybe a little bit more of a broader immunity towards the coronavirus. We do see for some people, if they have a little bit of fatigue or achiness after their first shot, they're likely to have some fatigue or achiness after their second shot. And it may be maybe 10-20% more if you've done a second shot with a different brand of vaccine. That being said, they are both creating immunity for you, and very robust immunity. And the studies have been there. The neat thing is that there, sometimes when we do studies, have trouble recruiting people in to do a study, but our group of people who are potential candidates for these studies are every person in the world, every person who's willing to contribute. So I am so grateful to those people who said, I know we haven't done this before, give me a shot from a different one, and let's see what happens, and look at my antibody levels and watch my reactions. And we've seen that it's very safe to do that.
Dr. Kathy Dabrus, our guest. We have a question here submitted by way of our hashtag RealTalkRJ from Alicia. Alicia, thanks for tuning in. Says, how protected are people under 12 years of age if those around them are fully vaccinated? Will this help prevent infection, reduce symptoms, or create a scenario where COVID will target and circulate through this population? That from Alicia, who says she'll be catching your answer later today when she downloads the podcast.
Yeah, so children seem to be a little bit different. As you've been aware kind of from media reports, very few children are hospitalized for your classic COVID infection, but they do react in a little bit of a different way with this multi-system inflammation. We're also still studying children to learn a little bit about how their respiratory system captures and reacts with the coronavirus vaccine, which seems to be actually a little bit different. Again, it's you quite surprising in some ways, that because we normally think of young children as little cesspools of infection and colds and things like that, yet the coronavirus behaves quite differently in them. So it really is under study, but to have an understanding that the receptors that catch the virus in children are different, and how their body reacts to it is different. And that's the situation where there are such smaller numbers. We're still in research and sorting that part of stuff out. But it is ongoing. So if you think of how far we have come in the last year in terms of our understanding of the virus and the variants and how it spreads and developing vaccines, please stay tuned. Things will be updated as soon as the data becomes available, and it's an evolving kind of thing. So I don't have a hard and fast answer, but it is definitely being worked on right now. What about those under 12s and how they react differently to the virus?
Yeah, Doc, you may have touched on this already. I just want to clarify. We've got a couple of audience members that are curious to know if you think that this vaccine will ultimately be like an annual thing, or if you require boosters, or if once you're double vaxxed or fully vaccinated, as they say, is that it?
Time will tell. Right now, as they test the new variants that are coming around, it appears that our vaccines, if you get the 2 doses of vaccine, give you very robust immunity. But it has continued to evolve over the last year. And so it's really hard to crystal ball how will things go over the next year. There definitely, as new variants emerge, we'll be testing to see, are our vaccines still effective? The good news has been, yes, they continue to be effective against the variants that we have seen so far. But I can't completely protect the future. It may be possible that the vaccines will need to be slightly reformulated based on variants. But time will tell on that one, but we know where we're at now, that our vaccines are protecting against the circulating variants that are in Canada right now.
I know that scientists have been warning that this highly contagious Delta variant could be Alberta's primary strain by late June. Obviously would be of concern to people here. Kay Lynn's watching our show, just a short ferry ride from you out of Vancouver. She's wondering if you could comment on this Delta variant. She wonders, how safe are we even with our double vaccination? And should we be reopening given this information? What's your opinion on this Delta variant?
So the Delta variant is very concerning because we have seen that with one vaccine, you get about 30% protection. With the second vaccine given, you go closer up to 90% protection. So again, the big message here is get both of your vaccines. Going part way gives only part way results and shorter lasting results. You really need that second vaccine in order to boost the immunity and maintain long-term memory antibodies to hold that immunity. And our hope is if we get everyone vaccinated and we shut down transmission, we have fewer new variants becoming available. It's when there's rapid transmission, that's when you have the virus mutating and changing. So again, the strength of this message is get both your shots as soon as you can. It will protect you and your community.
I've got an email from Lauren who says, Ryan, please don't use my last name. We've not yet informed our family, she says, but I am in my first trimester. Congratulations to Lauren. She says, I'm expecting and I'm getting mixed messages, she says, or at least getting mixed information on whether or not it's safe for her to get vaccinated. What's your word to those that are with child, so to speak?
So initially, when something new comes out, we don't test it automatically in pregnant people. But through the course of the last year, people have been pregnant, not realized they were pregnant, been immunized. And we've seen that as we get those case studies building up, we're not seeing complications from having vaccinations. We are seeing complications from getting COVID in pregnancy. Recent studies have actually shown for whooping cough and influenza that if the mother gets immunized with those vaccines during pregnancy, she boosts the immunity for her child in their first year of life, offering them more protection. So the mother makes the antibodies for the baby, and as the baby is born, has those antibodies in place, at least for the first part of life, to protect them. So if you wanted to protect yourself from complications in pregnancy, if you want to protect your baby that's born and in the first while of their life, protect them from COVID, get immunized during pregnancy.
I grew up in Calgary, and it was always a really exciting time of year when the red flags would go up on all the lampposts and all the light standards, those classic, iconic Calgary Stampede flags. And you knew when the flags went up that the Stampede was just weeks away. I was in Calgary yesterday passing through on my way back up to Edmonton, and I saw the red flags in an entirely new context, this time as literal red flags. I have very mixed feelings No, I don't have mixed feelings about the Stampede going on. I'm one of those that wants to see us move on from this pandemic. I'm very eager to I'm a professional live event host. I love being in front of 20,000 people. Trust me. But I'm also concerned about a super spreader event, this Delta variant, which is really exploding down in Calgary, 4 times the number of cases as opposed to a week ago. Do you think that there's any possible way that the Calgary Stampede can be rolled out safely, or do you have concern that this could create a problem that might last for another number of months?
Whenever we get a large group of people together and you have a certain proportion unimmunized, there's a concern for a lot of people getting infected. I must say I'm not an expert in terms of coming from a family practice background. I'm generally working with individual people. So in terms of policies or actual public health risks, globally, I'm afraid I can't comment on that. But I would encourage anyone who is thinking of going to attend the Calgary Stampede, especially with the Delta variant circulating, make sure you have had both of your vaccines.
Let me circle back and ask you this. You just said this is what your patients ask you, and I would be one of those patients if you were my doctor. I'd say, what would you do? Or what would you tell your family members? If you do have both your shots, doctor, if you were offered an opportunity, somebody wants to fly you out on a tourism junket, bring you to the Calgary Stampede, show you all the cool stuff, you get to see, the infield and the rodeo and all that types of stuff, all those types of things, would you go?
I would not go, because the vaccine we know is not 100% protection. You still need to use your other layers of common sense and social distancing and things like that. And for me in particular, I consider my responsibility to my patients as well. I have immune suppressed patients who I'll be seeing, cancer chemotherapy patients. And so just the message is you have a responsibility to yourself and your family to keep yourself well. If you can think beyond that, there are members of our community who, in spite of doing public health measures and having both vaccines themselves, they know they're going to continue to be at risk of this deadly virus. And those, again, are our cancer chemotherapy patients and our transplant patients. So we have to think not just of ourselves, but others within our community. And I'm sure someone would feel bad if they, got sick themselves, but even worse if they had someone who is immune suppressed or on their cancer chemotherapy, perhaps doing well and recovering from their cancer, but they were exposed to COVID through you and passed away from that.
Yeah, to say the least. We'll make this our last question, Doctor. We've got to let you get back to your practice, obviously. Michelle, chiming in from Central Alberta. Michelle at a beautiful Rocky Mountain house wonders, have we talked about infertility concerns as a side effect? She says it's a common concern. I know it's been debunked, but people still think that there's a heightened risk here. For people, unlike Lauren, who's in her first trimester and very excited about that, what about people that are trying to get pregnant? Is infertility a risk they run?
So, again, not an expert in this particular area, but as a family doctor, the information that I have is that, again, these vaccines do not affect fertility. We have had some women notice a change in their menstrual cycle. So it might be a little bit earlier, a little bit lighter, a little bit heavier, a little bit crampier. But there hasn't been any concerns that it's affecting fertility.
Okay. Dr. Kathy Dabrus, out of Victoria, BC, beautiful part of the country, obviously. Victoria Family Doctors counter vaccine hesitancy. We're so appreciative, not just of your time, but of your expertise as well, Doc. Thanks for this.
Thanks for having me. And I just want to tell all your listeners, please go out there and get both your vaccines, not just for yourself, but for your community as well.
I love it. Thanks, Doctor. And I'll double down on that. I saw a comment here. Where was it? I'll try to scroll back and find it. Somebody said, I don't, my whole thing, like I'm going to get vaccinated. I'll just, instead of trying to find it, I'll just summarize. But an audience member just said, basically, I get it, and I'm going to get the vaccine, but if somebody else doesn't want to get it, then that's their choice. That's their right. Nobody should have to get the vaccine. And to a certain degree, I agree. I mean, I think that would be absolutely unacceptable in any circumstance, really. I mean, a global pandemic to me is just about the most extreme circumstance. And so I think that that's kind of the high bar there. And I can't imagine any reality where it would be appropriate or acceptable or unconcerning if a government were to mandate medical treatment or vaccines. And I understand that people have the right and the freedom to say thanks, but no thanks. And that is your choice. And I would support your choice there in the sense that you're right. I think it's the wrong choice, personally. And if you say, well, I don't give a shit about what you think, Jesperson, then that's perfectly fine. You don't have to, and you're not obligated to. However, people aren't obligated to allow you to enter their restaurants, to enter their workplaces, to enter their aircraft, to enter their hotels, to enter their arenas, or anywhere else, anything else. I mean, you can make the choice to not do something. That is your right. But it doesn't mean that you are entitled or that you retain the right or the freedom to insert yourself into every social setting without getting on board. I'd be curious to know from people what workplaces are doing and what policies are in place. I'd be curious to know from people where the support is at. This could be another Twitter poll that we could run, and another unscientific, unofficial Twitter poll on where the appetite's at for businesses, private or otherwise, saying if you're not vaccinated, we're not doing business with you. And that's our right. And I would support that too. I heard a story over the weekend that was very concerning about a family that decided to travel over the Christmas break. They went down south to a sunny locale. This is a prominent family, by the way, in southern Alberta. They took the rapid test on the way back, complied with it. They've been loudly using their platform as very, what do I say? They have strong feelings about mask regulations, about the validity of this whole COVID-19 thing, about vaccines, these types of things. They traveled south. They came back, did the rapid testing. Just under the 2-week window after that, little guy gets sick and causes an outbreak in their small community. Their choice to travel became everybody's problem. And that's where I have the issue. There's a lot of talk about rights and freedoms right now, but your rights and freedoms end where mine begin. Right? And these are the types of things I think that we need to focus on. You're right. You don't have to get the vaccine and nobody can force you to do it. And I don't think that we want to live in a society where that type of thing would happen. As a matter of fact, that would be terrifying. But at the same time, there's going to be trade-offs. And in my mind, those should be unapologetic. Always open to what you have to say on this. Always, Nadine says, just name them, will ya? Nah. BG Video Game says, what he's trying to say is that you have the right to make your own choices, but all choices have consequences. Good choice, good consequence. Bad choice, bad consequence. Blake says, my family is all on the smart side. I like the swagger. Either double vaccinated already or getting it. The workplace has already stated, we can offer the info, but it's nobody's business if we're vaccinated or not. I don't know if I'm going to be showing up to a workplace. I mean, hey, listen, we are a workplace. We have this tight little team of 3. We've not had this conversation, but I think that's because everybody's been pretty open and vocal about where they're at and what their track record has looked like or what their intentions are. I don't really know how I'd manage it if, for example, Sarah Hoyles, you come on the team and it turns out 3 weeks in, I didn't make it one of the interview questions when you were interviewing for this gig. I didn't ask you how you felt about vaccines, but quite frankly, I don't know what I would do if you said you weren't getting vaccinated. We'd have to figure something out.
Yeah. And the thing that, and maybe this is, I'm just going to do it. Now I'm starting to sound like you, Ryan.
Yeah. If you're like me, you say, I'm not going to, and then you do it.
And then you do it.
Yeah.
So when I think about it, I think of it as like a sexually transmitted infection, an STI. So if someone is not going to disclose, that's taking someone else's health into their own hands. So if someone doesn't disclose that they have an infection of some sort, they are deciding for their partner or partners their future health ongoing. And so to me, that is bold and unfair that you would decide on behalf of someone that you know or don't know what their health will be in perpetuity.
But this is all about selfishness, right?
Yes.
I mean, and here's where I want to be careful, where I clarify what I said to a friend earlier, which is that I don't think that vaccine hesitancy is inherently unhealthy or irresponsible. I don't blame people for having questions. It's great to have questions. I mean, question everything. It's why we bring on experts. It's why we have these types of segments like we just had with Dr. Dabrus. And so that's perfectly fine. But I think that, and so I'm not calling the vaccine hesitant selfish. But I certainly will invoke that word selfish for others. I mean, like, the prominent mental wealth coach out of Edmonton, this guy that saw his Instagram followers explode and everybody thought he should come on this show to share his thoughts on how being physically fit can protect you from COVID-19 and all these types of things. Absolutely zero medical background, absolutely zero credibility to be talking about vaccines and virology. It's pure selfishness, right? Let's sequester or let's isolate the seniors in society. Let's lock them down so the rest of society can perfectly function. Or let's not concern ourselves with COVID-19 deaths because the majority of them come with comorbidities. It's the first time any of these people have ever invoked the word comorbidities. Ask them to spell it. I doubt they could. But all they know is that if someone dies with a comorbidity, it's a justifiable death. They were weakened by their chemotherapy, or they had diabetes, or they're immunocompromised, or they had asthma as a child. I mean, these are comorbidities. Well, I've heard that the majority of fatalities from COVID-19, the majority of those that we lost had comorbidities. So let's not concern ourselves with the rest of us without comorbidities. It's pure selfishness. It's not being able to see beyond or outside your own realm. I mean, why do you think that people are pissed about the premier and senior cabinet ministers dining on the Sky Palace terrace? It's because it comes across as selfish and entitled. That's what rubs people the wrong way. Do as I say, not as I do. So that's where I think the conversation needs to go. You know, I'm going to have to ask Mishif Sharon. Is it Sharon Mishif or is it Mishif Sharon? I'm probably mispronouncing the name. I apologize. I see you chiming in all the time on the live chat, and I'm grateful. Mishif says it also comes from a place of privilege. Sure. Another says it's a selfish province. Thus, you know, conservative politics for decades and decades. It's a party of you keep yours and I'll keep mine.
I think it's part of
I just want to issue the caveat, not all conservatives, but carry on.
Fair enough. To me, it's actually broadening the lens and saying about, and I mean, the doctor that we just spoke with out of Victoria definitely referenced it about getting reputable sources of information. And so there's this piece of like critical thinking, and I think it goes back to our other guest that we had today about curriculum. Like, how do we learn about critical thinking? How are we taught that? How are we learned to decipher and metabolize information and like run it through? And so to me, when you speak of that wellness expert or whatever he calls himself,
a mental wealth coach.
There we go. Expert is too generous of a term. It's about being able to decipher. But then I also know then that gets loaded with, oh, so you are elitist, Sarah. You're saying that I need to have post-secondary education. Is that what you're saying, Sarah? So all these other people are not. So it's divisive. Whereas it's actually about data and not getting your information from Facebook.
I don't know that this is true, and Greg has been a good source of us for verified information in the past. So I'm going to assume he's bang on this, but he says that Syncrude is requiring vaccinations for its workers. So that's one workplace, Syncrude, that is requiring vaccinations. Alyssa says if workplaces can make random drug testing a function of employment, they can certainly make vaccines mandatory. Don't like it, get another job. Bang on, Alyssa. I 100% agree with you. Nadine says private businesses have the right to refuse service. Absolutely. I mean, then you're getting into a big, messy type scenario. You know, the homophobe baker that doesn't want to bake the gay couple the wedding cake. I mean, we can get into that. And if somebody wants to run this up to the Supreme Court, maybe they could, if the court will hear it. I'd be curious to see where that would go. Who was it? One of our audience members said, you know, this is Chelsea, said, I don't think that people should be required to disclose their personal health information. Like, in other words, to prove that they've been vaccinated. I don't know. I mean, I know that having traveled internationally, you absolutely have to get vaccinated to enter certain countries. I had to get a whole bunch of shots to go to Ethiopia. I had to get a whole bunch of shots to go to South America.
Yeah, me too. It's like same.
That's just
you have a little. You have a little passport. You get the little booklet. There's like a certain amount of time that you need to take before you're actually just like the COVID vaccines.
Yeah,
just like.
So I mean, you know, it might be one of those types of things where you say, you know, you don't necessarily have to prove or you don't have to demonstrate to address Chelsea's concern. You don't have to disclose your personal health information, but if you're not willing to disclose whether or not you're vaccinated, I'm not willing to provide you this service. Now, very good and fair questions. People say, well, how are you going to prove that you've been vaccinated? Right? I mean, I know that people get the sheets and everything. I don't exactly carry mine around. I'm pretty sure I know where it is. Pretty sure. I mean, which would be an incredible accomplishment considering all the piles of paper that follow me around. But still, Should there be these types of passports? Some idiot's going to make some comment about a yellow star on the armband. I'm sure that some idiot's going to make those types of comments.
Some idiots already have.
And I see that some folks are saying, hey, we didn't get around to this, or we didn't ask the doctor about that, and my apologies, we had limited time. We obviously had to let her get back to her practice, and we can continue having these types of conversations as they come. I wanted to let you know, this is our first day of our broadcast week, which means our new question of the week is up, and I'm really excited about this one. So you go to ryanjesperson.com, and right at the top of the page, you're going to see the link to our question of the week. In this upcoming municipal election, this fall, this October, there's a chance, it is happening, there's a chance that Alberta's government, the United Conservatives, will put forward a referendum question that asks Albertans if the commitment to equalization payments should be taken out of the referendum. Should be taken out of the Constitution, is what that's supposed to say. The idea being that Alberta's been getting the shaft on equalization and it needs to be amended. This is not a legally binding referendum question, meaning that the federal government does not have to acknowledge or take action on the results, and of course it wouldn't. Nor are they likely to, otherwise a great deal of federal policy would be delivered via the referendum results of a single province. In this week's Get Real question of the week, we thought we would start by asking you the exact question that will appear on your municipal ballot, and we thought maybe we'd save the province some money. After that, we have some lighthearted follow-up questions that we would love to hear your opinion on. I expect that this question of the week presented by our official research and strategy partners at Y Station is going to make the rounds. I expect that we're going to have a good number of respondents here, and I'm curious to see where you, real talkers, will land on the value of this referendum question. Tomorrow, live at 9:15 Mountain, 11:15 Eastern, right here on Real Talk. Of course, if you're grabbing the podcast later in the day, thank you for that. You can catch it at your convenience. We will be talking about equalization. We're going to be digging into this with Professor Trevor Toome, the economist out of the University of Calgary, and I think that's going to be a great conversation. But this will give us some data. If we can get a good sample, if we can get more than 1,000 people answering this one, which I don't think is going to be a big deal. I'm going to gun for 2,000 on this because I think it's going to make the rounds online. I want to see a good number of people respond to this and let us know what you think about the value of this referendum question on trying to get the equalization formula that Stephen Harper and Jason Kenney and the others authored. Let's not forget who is responsible for this equalization formula on getting that amended. And so we'll look for your opinions on that. You can answer that question again at ryanjesperson.com. Just look for the question of the week. Also, the first day of our broadcast week, each and every week, we, thanks to our friends at Kuby Energy, focus on the positives. Now, you know that Kuby is a Tesla-certified solar installer. You know that they've got teams working across Western Canada right now on projects large and small. You may want to run solar panels into your garden shed, or maybe your cabin is off the grid, but you want to finally bring some electricity in. Heck, maybe you've got a big, huge office tower and you want to know what the future of solar and sustainable energy looks like as the world moves towards net zero. Jake and his team at Kuby Energy have the answers. They can point to projects that they're currently working on or projects they've completed, like the Edmonton Convention Center, and give you a better sense of what's possible. You can visit them online at kubyenergy.ca or, of course, find them under the sponsors tab on our website, ryanjesperson.com. It is Tuesday, following a Real Talk long weekend, which means the first day of our broadcast week brings, thanks to our friends at Kuby Energy, positive reflections. We're going to lead off with this one from Brad. Absolutely love this one. Brad sent us a video and an email to go along with it. He says, last Monday I had the pleasure to celebrate the remission of my sister's breast cancer diagnosis. Says her name's Brandy and says she was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer back in February of 2020, just before the pandemic. He says, my heart sunk when I heard the news. I couldn't believe that a person who keeps herself in such great shape would receive that diagnosis. She was going into surgery the end of March to remove the tumor in the affected lymph nodes and then chemo and then radiation. And I knew that once this was all over, she'd have that strength and we'd do something we both love to celebrate that mile mark. My thought was to climb Canada's highest elevation paved road on our road bikes, an altitude of 2,202 meters, the Highwood Pass. He says this spring we purchased a used road bike for Brandy. Says there's shortages in the industry. Look at this. There she is on that bike. I just got chills right now. He says Highwood Pass, Highway 40 closed to vehicle traffic from November 20th to June 15th, which means that cyclists from all levels are flocking to this road now that the snow is gone before the cars return. He says the road is a treasure I've appreciated for many years, and I wanted to complete the ride with my sister. Absolutely amazing. He says, along the way, we heard a few times from other cyclists that there were grizzly bears on the side of the road at different places. We didn't see them, unfortunately, but we made it to the top of the pass in just over 2 hours, feeling great. Took a few photos to mark the accomplishment and then back down to the vehicles. It's been a hard year for us all, but I can't imagine how hard it's been while fighting cancer. I'm so proud of my sister to be able to be clear of all this, in remission after the year. He says, keep up the great work with the show and positive reflections. That from Brad. Absolutely beautiful. We love these photos. And by the way, if you're hearing this on the podcast, we push out by way of our YouTube channel, Real Talk Ryan Jesperson Positive Reflections is a standalone segment. So you can jump right to it and see what we're talking about. This is from James. James says, I wanted to send in a couple photos of my kids and our lilacs. He says, this is Karen. Her name's Firstborn. That's what we call her. And this is Cameron. Cameron we call the boy. He says, this is where we find our joy, the simple things in life. And this is what brings peace to my heart. That from James. Thanks for thinking of us and positive reflections with that, James. This is a photo that I snapped just this weekend. The draw of those lilacs is undeniable. This is my little 5-year-old. This is Wyatt Rudy, learning to climb fences and also learning that no, despite how wonderful they smell, you cannot pick lilacs from other people's trees. Okay, maybe we grab just one, but still, don't pick other people's lilacs. It's not cool. I mean, unless it's just one, maybe just one. But we're going to hear about this big time, aren't we? Hey, a little guy developing a love for lilacs. What can I say? And finally, this is the selfish part of Positive Reflections this week. I just wanted to tell you what a wonderful weekend we had and share with you some photos from our wheelin' adventure in beautiful Kananaskis country. This is McLean Creek, just west of Calgary. We were so lucky to get out there and spend a few days getting dirty. This is my little guy tracing pictures into the dusty trail. This is what childhood is all about. How about this? This is baby's first wheel. My brother Jonas, his wonderful wife Tammy, their daughters Perrin and Soleil. Soleil out on the trail for the very first time. And this, my friends, this is the parkland we protect. Regardless of your hobbies, we can all agree our parks are worth protecting, and we get on board to take steps to do exactly that. Responsible together, sharing the landscape we're so beautifully blessed to have in our very own backyard. We wish you fresh air. We wish you family time. And ultimately, in the context of what we've been talking about today, we wish a quick return to that time when we can get together in larger groups, hug again, and say, I love you face to face. Love you guys, Real Talkers. Thanks for tuning in today. Make it a great Tuesday. We'll talk to you tomorrow live at 8:30 Mountain Time. Until then.